Coming up on episode 82 of the Upful Life podcast.
Hey. And everybody hurts, oh, sometimes.
And I threw on some shit kickers and I got out on, and I was like, I'm walking around the neighborhood. I saw these trees down in my yard. I was like, I've got to make sure my neighbors don't have trees on their houses. And so I'm walking up the block and it was really felt like, again, like a sort of apocalyptic movie. There's trees down on cars. There's trees across the road. And all of a sudden, my neighbor are pulling chains out to try to yank a tree out of the way to see if we can make a path on the road. But you couldn't get one tree out of the way without there being another one. And I'm in a neighborhood. It's not even like I'm up in the mountain hollers where some of these people had to completely rebuild their roads to their houses for a week before they could even get out.
Hey. And everybody hurts, oh, sometimes.
And for someone like Leah, who's been able to dedicate so much. So to be saying, I can hear the exhaustion and the exasperation. If you only knew how much Leah is doing and showing up in the community, but then also continue to carry the torch of her craft and her song and the medicine of her melody and her songwriting and her poetics. I mean, she has continued to show up twofold in carrying that torch through her craft, through her song to these rural communities, right at the end of doing 9 hours worth of shifts in 4 different places across the region. I think more so importantly, or just what we're really excited to share, is just how much care, self-governance, emergent, connection of just needs and getting to know your community has occurred in the last many weeks since it went down. And so Leah and I have been in a very fortunate position to be able to kind of walk out towards those efforts and to show up and learn and figure out where can we be helpful. And so we've been very fortunate and grateful to be able to have that opportunity. And it's been really, really, really freaking cool to witness. And so if anything, we love to just tell those stories, to be a little voice in the ground from what we're witnessing, just knowing that some of the truth or whatever people might be coming up with in their narratives tends to come from folks who are outside this region. But if anything, we'd like to shine some light on the love and the care that we're witnessing every day.
I'm a bozo. Oh, yeah, I thought you had it. You recognize it. I love that. Many people like
Let's make a toast forever and ever. Let's make a toast forever and ever.
Yes, indeedy. Welcome to the Upful Life podcast. I'm your host, B. Getz, and this is episode number 82. Coming at you live and direct from the Vibe Junkie studio in Oakland, California. This one is gonna be a whole lot, so open your hearts. So grateful you are tuning in.
I love it very much.
Independent Arts and Music of Asheville, or iamAVL for short, was founded in 2012. The organization was conceived as a vehicle specifically to preserve and promote Asheville's cultural renaissance and local music scene. During the pandemic times, with the help of dedicated supporters, iamAVL raised and put over $60,000 into the hands of local musicians, production workers, and venues. Yet here we are again, after Hurricane Helene, at a time when many gigs are lost many venues still closed, and the timeline for returning to normalcy remains uncertain. With the Music Industry Relief Fund, iamAVL is eager to play that role again for the temporarily disabled local music industry, and excited to get your donations into the right hands. iamAVL, Independent Arts and Music of Asheville, is a 501c3, so donations can be tax deductible, and if realizing a tax deduction for the full value of a stock donation works better for you, you can email them at info@iamavl.com for more information, and you can hit them at that email for really any inquiries about these fundraisers. One effort this fund is initiating is the Bring Back the Heartbeat campaign. Through this initiative, iamAVL is partnering with local venues and establishments who hire musicians and production workers to offset their costs and get our people back to work. The Music Industry Relief Fund. Thank you for your support. iamavl.com. Don't rebuild without it. Yes, indeedy. Wanted to show some love to this benefit show for iamAVL at Asheville Music Hall on December 6th, as folks are coming together for Joe Marcinik's Dead Funk Summit. We're going to hear a bunch about Joe Marcinik later in the episode, but he's putting together a benefit show with some real heavy hitters on December 6th. Local cats from Asheville like the great Jeff Sipe, Rebecca Todd, Marcus White, Isaac Haddon, and Josh Blake, who you're going to hear from at length later in this podcast episode. But I wanted to show some love to this event because it's raising money for the same organization that we are on this pod, friends of the show, iamAVL. And Alvida's Way is opening. It's December 6th, 2024 at Asheville Music Hall. We're also going to hear at length from Asheville Music Hall's own Brian Good. So Brian Good towards the end of this show, Josh Blake towards the front end. Check out link in the show notes for this come together benefit for iamAVL and Asheville Music Hall, Joe Marcinik's Dead Funk Summit. Greetings, dearly beloveds. So great to be back with you, episode 82. This is going to be a bit of a brief Upful update because we have a lengthy, somewhat solemn, sobering program ahead. But I do want to break it down for y'all like we always do. First things first, please like and subscribe to the Upful Life podcast. In fact, smash that subscribe button. It really helps with awareness about the existence and content of this program. Even better, if you have the time and are so inclined, please rate and review the Upful Life podcast on your podcast platform of choice. It goes a long way with those algorithms and sending them in this direction. If you want to talk to me, if you want to holler at B, send me an email. b.gets@upfullife.com. I love to hear from the people. Any kind of suggestions or recommendations or reflections or constructive criticisms, all are welcome. And if you want to support this show, go over to upfullife.com. At the top right, there is a support button. Take you to a Venmo, and you can send me a couple of dollars for making you holla. And if you prefer to use some other donation method besides Venmo, just send me an email, b.gets@upfullife.com. I'm sure we can figure something out. If you're curious what I've been up to for the last month since we last spoke, cruise on over to upfullife.com and you can read my latest pieces from Pretty Lights EP Dual Fusion Unity to the new Asher Falero record Worlds, a deep dive back to Swanee Halloween 2024, and a review of the Sound Tribe Sector 9 shows in Oakland last weekend. So that should do it with a quick Upful update. And now let's get into episode 82.
I met you over mountain moons, banjo riffs and fiddle tunes, and Sugar River, Stair Creek first, once now, twice now, every weekend. Lean in, beloved friend, bits of tender reel me in, and tip the cup and pour the rubies, wild laughter, lust and beauty, yeah. Find to me with patience, and I'll write you novels of acquaintance.
Yes, indeedy. Welcome back to the Upful Life podcast. This is episode 82. And a bit of a somber, emotional, bumpy ride ahead. I hope everybody's down for a bit of a different experience on the Upful Life podcast. And it's something I felt really called to do and to produce. And we're going to dive into the aftermath of Hurricane Helene in Appalachia, in Asheville specifically, through the voices and the stories and the humans that lived the nightmare and are deeply immersed in the recovery and rebirth of this special place. And no, I haven't spent very much time at all in Asheville over the years, yet such a beautiful group of chosen family that has rooted down there over the past 25 years, and in all aspects of my life and my wife and our shared friends and individual friends and family members, and it's just dear to both of us. So naturally, watching from afar what's going on down there, both the storm and the aftermath, has been heart-wrenching and also heart-filling, and that's the story that we're going to tell today through, appropriately enough, novels of acquaintance, beginning with a member of Rising Appalachia herself, Leah Song. But before I get into introducing who's going to be on the show, I'm sure most everybody knows what the hell happened. Short sort of synopsis, but basically it's hard to comprehend the damage that Hurricane Helene wrought on western North Carolina's mountain towns in late September. There was like 9 inches of rain in 2 days, causing severe flooding before the storm even hit. And then soon after that, landslides forced closures on the highways, cutting off major access, power went out, disruptions to cell service, left people, residents, visitors, isolated for days, making it feel post-apocalyptic to many people. And utilities, including water and power, were restored in stages. Certain areas still in recovery mode to this day. Only November 18th, after a 53-day water crisis, the city of Asheville finally lifted its boil water notice. Arguably prematurely, some say, but they did restore clean and potable water throughout Asheville's taps. And that was a huge step for restaurants and hotels to reopen, but a little too late for some businesses because they thrive on autumn tourism. So that's kind of the overview of what happened and what they're up against here down there in Asheville. And, you know, when I look at the metrics for this podcast and I see who's listening where, you know, of course, I'm from Philly area. We got Philly, we got New York, you know, New Orleans, Denver, the Bay Area, but also Asheville, right there with those major metropolitan areas. So speaks to the arts community and their involvement in this greater La Cosa Nostra thing of ours, this musical universe that we somehow exist and know each other and avoid the, you know, darkness by seeking refuge in shared community and songs, dance, villaging. I met many of you at festivals, and we're all closely connected by this thing, and therefore it pained me greatly to see what so many of those folks were going through out there. Initially, we did silent auction, which wasn't an Upful Life thing. I just hopped on a moving train. 3 women in the Pretty Lights community, Jennifer, Erin, and Erica, put together creatives for Western North Carolina. They initially did it during the pandemic, but they really dove in because they also have some roots in the area. They really put together this magnificent silent auction. In 72 hours, we raised $32,000, and half of that was matched by a silent donor for the Brother Wolf Animal Rescue. The rest went to beloved Asheville, which we're going to hear a lot about in this forthcoming episode. But nonetheless, after that awesome silent auction, and thank you to everybody who donated gifts, who donated money, and who also bid on the various services and items that were on offer. Eternal thanks and a deep bow. But that just felt like the beginning, and I wanted to use this podcast and this platform of a way to continue to keep the recovery of Asheville and Appalachia in people's frontal lobe during the holidays. We really want to drive people to donate to various mutual aid organizations, both in the arts community and just the greater Asheville and Appalachia area. And there'll be a bunch of that discussed, and there'll be links in the show notes. Grassrootsmutualaid.org, iamAVL.com, Floodback Art. There are a number that we're going to champion, but the ridiculous level of destruction and devastation and everything that happened, and all the stories of how my dear friends and peers and folks in the music community are battling back. I'm going to introduce 4 different conversations with 5 different people who lived a different version of the same nightmare and are all in one way or another connected to Upful Life, the podcast, my brand, this community, and the music culture at large. So with that, a love letter to Appalachia.
Don't feed me yours, 'cause your food does not endure. I think I need a cup of tea. The world keeps burning. Oh, what a day. What a day. I am resilient. I trust the movement. I negate the chaos. Uplift the negative. I'll show up at the table again and again and again. I'll close my mouth and learn to listen. Whoa, 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 whoa.
Before we get started here on episode 82, I just wanted to shout out and show some love to an absolute superhero down there in Asheville, and that's Katie Flanagan. Now, I know Katie from back in the day when I lived in Philly and spent a lot of time in New York and Rutgers, and nonetheless, we've stayed in quasi-touch over the years and reconnected at Fish a couple of summers ago. But I've been paying attention to her work in the recovery there in Asheville, where she lives and has rooted down for some time. And I'm clearly just blown away. She's completely devoted her entire life and every waking day in service to her community and getting out to the rural areas and the elderly folks and the impoverished and the hungry. And she's just been an absolute Energizer bunny of epic. So a lot of folks I know down there are doing big things, and I'm not trying to leave anybody out. I see you, all you folks, Sheila Shine and Shanda Panda and Lydia Violet, of course, everybody that you're going to hear from on this podcast. But I really wanted to show love to Katie Flanagan. You can follow her on Facebook, Katie with an IE.Flanagan.90. Most of her stuff's public up there. You can see her daily, shout outs, what she needs, for who, for why. It's really remarkable stuff. And I just wanted to take a moment for anybody listening out there just to show her love. I'll put a link to, her Venmo in the show notes, and you can just kind of follow along and see what she's up to. And if you want to contribute, that's great. But just, wanted to shout her out. So shout out Katie. Shout out everybody out there doing the good work. And now let's get into episode 82.
I see my light come shining from the west unto the east. Any day now, any day now, I shall be released.
All right, all right. Well, first up, we've got Leah Song from Rising Appalachia, who's been on the podcast before, episode 61, one of my proudest moments, like ever. But she's been neck deep in, this whole experience, and really is a flagship artist and activist and troubadour representing Appalachia. And how great of a name for this moment in time is Rising Appalachia. I mean, even just thinking about it gives me chills. And they've been one of my favorite bands for over a decade, and it's an honor and privilege to know them. And Leah was very kind and gracious to take time out of her extremely busy, recovery life, and also her career, which is not exactly on pause, while, they literally dig out of the mud. So thrilled to get some time with her, and did so thanks to Andy Fyfe, otherwise known as just Fyfe in the DJ world, but he's Andy Fyfe to me, and I met him at Burning Man my first year, 2013, at the Recycle Camp. Man, we just broed out hard. He's just a fucking great human, an inspiration, founder of B Corp, which is a nonprofit organization that sets up for-profit organizations and corporations to meet the highest standards of social and environmental performance, accountability, and transparency. Just a very admirable mission, and if a company's a B Corp, that's a company I want to support. And of course, the opportunity to speak. I heard Andy on NPR talking about the post-Helene stuff, and then reached out and said, hey, can we do that for the pod? And he was kind enough to do so. It was hard to get them both on the horn at the same time, given their busy schedules and the devotion they have to this whole recovery effort. So we're starting with Leah Song from Rising Appalachia and Fyfe down there in Asheville and Weaverville, working with Beloved Asheville and some other efforts. So let's hear about it. That's going to be our first chat on episode 82. Yeah, I'm playing a lot of Rising App for obvious reasons. Give thanks.
Any day now, any day now, I shall be released.
Solid. Well, it's great to be here, and it's I'm appreciative of having a Starlink that we just hooked up last night to be able to have the connection to have this conversation. So I don't know, 6-7 weeks in, it's we're still trying to get our grip on things. So I'm Andy Fyfe, and I'm over in Weaverville, North Carolina, just north of Asheville. And I've been here since March 2020, when the world got shook up a little bit, and I found myself here with my sweetheart with some fresh water and living on a farm and a nice little hike out the back door, which was a nice change of pace from where I was in Brooklyn, given the pandemic and what was going on there. So about 6 or 7 weeks ago, I'm not sure when it actually hit, but the hurricane came through our neck of the woods here, and we were anticipating it. We had some kind of 3rd, 4th generation Appalachians who were coming to our door and telling us that they were going to take off and evacuate maybe 2-3 days before. And we've had some storms, we've had some flooding. We got a creek that runs through our backyard with a little dinky bridge that's pretty intimidating for people to cross that go on, gets into our property. And so when they were taking off, you could just kind of see in their eye of like, man, maybe we should be paying more attention to this, and I'm a city kid, so I try to check myself on not freaking out when other people seem to have a good grip on what's going on. But anyways, fast forward like a few hours into the night, next morning, it just became pretty quickly overwhelming with the water, and like super quick. I mean, the water was increasing, and the creek turned into more of a river. My partner's car was getting washed up across the way because I parked it across the street, thinking that would be higher ground, which was a wrong decision to be doing that. But I was at the neighbor's house, and It was just a wild circus of events, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear, and really just doing whatever it would take to be in the place that I chose to be while my partner and my kid were kind of up in the attic in our house right across the way. And everybody has their story. Like I think if anything, we had no idea really how to prepare, anticipate, and then you just react, with your immediate intuition, care, and also just like survival mode, because no one really had the answers. And so we had an evacuation notice, but we didn't know. And so we hiked out with my kid, my sweetheart, and then some other kid that one of our neighbors actually rescued out of his cabin who woke up floating with his dog, 20 or so year old kid, out of the way. So we hiked out for about a few hours, got out of there. And honestly, a big reason why we're able to do that was because we saw the face of my partner's sister here, Leah, who's on the interview with us, and her partner. And so we just kind of chased this mythical like feeling of security of, well, if they're out there, there must be a car out there. Let's just like get out of here and go as far as we can, higher ground, because it's going to be better than the risk of being right below this dam of which we live. And I just share like the very brief story because obviously there's a lot more in there. But I think more so importantly, or just what we're really excited to share, is just how much care, self-governance, emergent, connection of just needs, and getting to know your community has occurred in the last many weeks, since it went down. And so Leah and I have been in a very fortunate position to be able to, kind of walk out towards those efforts and to show up and learn and figure out where can we be helpful. And so we've been very fortunate and grateful to be able to have that opportunity. And it's been really, really, really freaking cool to witness. And so if anything, we love to just tell those stories, to be a little voice in the ground from what we're witnessing, just knowing that some of the truth or whatever people might be coming up with in their narratives tends to come from folks who are outside this region. But if anything, we'd like to shine some light on the love and the care that we're witnessing every day.
Wow, that's heavy duty and powerful, and also beautifully articulated. Not surprised, but it's just to hear it from your lips, and just really resonates deeply. I think Leah clicked in. Leah, can you hear us?
I'm here. Just clicked in.
Hi.
To catch the story in action.
We're so grateful for you making some time, sister. Thank you so much.
Totally. Good to be here. I'm calling from the back corner of the beloved headquarters, doing some organizing over here. It's nice to kind of have the hands in the madness and the chaos, and also be able to do a little storytelling. So just took a pause. I'm hanging out on a stack of crated up toilet paper right now.
Right on. Can you kind of just describe, like, woman on the scene, like, now that you're a few weeks into the recovery with Beloved, and the teammates and the organizing and the distribution, can you kind of like bring us to, where you're at and what's going on there, like right now?
Yeah, like kind of up to date at this moment. I feel like the pulse and the needs and the energy change every day. And I think we've kind of collectively gone through these waves of tremendous trauma and heartbreak, and then incredible resilience, and then disorientation, and then exhaustion, and then inspiration again. And, each day I think feels different for each person, really, and each community member and organization. I feel like for me, being someone that has often worked in frontline justice and kind of frontline relief work for many, many years, this is the first time where I was also in the impact zone, and very, very much in the middle of the storm when the storm struck, and very tied to the anxiety that comes when family is threatened, and when there's when there's not exactly a clear path through an environmental disaster. And so I think it's been really shaky ground emotionally for me personally, and also has felt even more clear and focused around what I can be doing and what my relationship to relief and recovery work is. And like Fyfe was just saying, you know, once our family got through the sort of hell or high water side of the storm, and we were all together and able to really just check in on each other, make sure our basic ground zero needs were met, then it became really clear that the next step was to be out amongst the community in any and every way that we could. And that's felt so important, so powerful. It's also been an antidote, I think, to despair, to exhaustion, is just to go out and be amongst the people. And so there's so much of that going on everywhere. And I'm here at the Be Loved headquarters. They are a point place for a lot of donations. They're also doing a lot of rebuilding work. They're building homes and tiny homes, delivering trailers, dropping off baby supplies and healthcare needs, and really, you name it, everything under the sun. And we've been splitting our time between here and some of the more rural areas, kind of leaning in and contributing in the cleanup in the Marshall and Madison County area, you know, which is a lot more just muck outs where you go into places that were really flooded and just take a shovel and haul out junk and wipe down windows. And there's so much to do, it can feel overwhelming. And then also the simplest way to feel able and capable and connected to this region and this community, I think, is just showing up every day and just doing something tiny, you know, or organizing supplies or just taking a delivery out to a family in need. Like, these are the ways I think that people are stepping up and showing up and catching their breath and feeling like, okay, in the face of disaster, we've heard over and over and over again, you know, it can really bring out the best in people. And I cannot tell you how much that's been the case here. Everyone has just put their personal grievances aside and their personal politics aside at that, and just shown up every day. And we're going to keep needing that for months and months and months to come. So there's my check-in from ground zero here.
That was great and really, again, well articulated, and I can hear the exhaustion and the exasperation and also the inspiration and the humanity and just the tone of your voice and the pentameter of your words. So I'm grateful for just you taking us there. You mentioned about the rural areas, and I think that's something I just kind of wanted to tap on a little bit from both of you, because we do have a lot of connections and friends and family in the Asheville area, the arts community, but you know, you go 10, 20, 30 miles in any direction and it's a different world. So I hear a lot of people like talk about, you know, that the rural places, it was tough, and I don't need to hear the gory details, but just so my listeners understand the gravity of what the, you know, people, small town Appalachia are digging out of. What's the reality, you know, 6 weeks in those places?
Well, I mean, I think you can go 5 minutes outside of the heart of downtown Asheville and you're in some areas that are pretty heavy hit, let alone 5, 10, 15, 30 minutes out. I just think it's a small mountain town, incredibly resilient folks, incredibly unprepared for a massive cataclysmic flood. And so many places are destroyed completely or nearly destroyed. Floors are caved in. Roads are now fixed because the Appalachian folks are incredibly capable and very good with tools, very good with equipment. So the roads are fixed. But I mean, you have people's homes that have holes in the roof from trees down that were completely flooded. up to 10, 20, all the way up to 23 feet, I think is the highest mark of some of the floods in areas right off the French Broad River in Madison County, in Burnsville and Spruce Pine. And so the rebuild, I think, is slow, and the emotional rebuild is slow, just having seen that much wiped out from under you. And Fyfe, I feel like you can even reflect on that in your community, knowing, the neighbors just up your road where we kind of all trekked in the height of the flooding, and we were seeing, the roads washing out completely and people's homes washing out, up to the roof line. And that's a lifetime of work, memories, nostalgia, comfort. It's a pretty long list of grievances.
Yeah, I want to tip my hat to you, Leah, because I think for a lot of people, including myself, we kind of hung our hat up on what we were doing before the storm when it came to work. And for someone like Leah, who's been able to dedicate so much, so to be saying, I can hear the exhaustion and the exasperation. If you only knew how much Leah is doing and showing up in the community, but then also continue to carry the torch of her craft and her song and the medicine of her melody and her songwriting and her poetics. I mean, just she has continued to show up twofold in carrying that torch through her craft, through her song to these rural communities, right at the end of doing 9 hours worth of shifts in 4 different places across the region. And so I have no idea how she keeps that stamina. But to see it in this light and the impact it has on others truly is an antidote to witness. And to see people brutally exhausted and yet still going, with a smile, but to be blanketed with a song that's whether it be familiar from Leah's craft or not, or new, it hits different. It resonates different. There's just so much poetic symbolism of water and earth and rising resilience and all that, that it's just taken a new shape and a new form. It's been a really beautiful opportunity for me to get more proximate and acquainted to like really badass people in these rural communities. Otherwise, we wouldn't have dropped in on that level. And to show up in this way almost catapults you into a depth of relationship that would just take a long time. So I hate the circumstance, but the outcome and the experience has been pretty worthwhile for us to be able to have this opportunity. It's been a real gift. I think what's really tricky about this storm, in addition to a lot of things, to Leah's point about people not being prepared, is just the geography is really complicated. And so you could always really, kind of weird, wonky country roads that, have private bridges. And understandably, people want to get away. They want privacy. They want to be able to be in the woods. And when something like this goes down, they're really far out of reach. And that symbolism of bridges has really been something that I've been thinking about or feeling, because I go up and down my road like this morning with my son at dawn, and we just see the same neighbor named Daniel who's out there with a skid steer just rebuilding that road that Leah mentioned. And right over his shoulder, he looks at his 2 single wides and his home completely washed out on their side. And he's now been doing it for weeks, rebuilding that road, maybe for his own sanity, but clearly rebuilding it for many, many, many neighbors, including myself, for us to be able to get up to our home. And there are so many bridges that are still washed out that I have no idea how they're going to rebuild those bridges. And the only ones who really have been able to rebuild them or rebuild them themselves. And there's something there about the physical element of rebuilding their bridge, but also that this has just crossed so many bridges, theoretical, political, socioeconomical, whatever it is. That's really beautiful to witness, and yet also scary. We are at this stage now of what's next, and how much more can the people in the community carry forward, and what's going to be necessary for this to really clean itself up, because it's going to be a long haul, and it's going to take a lot more in the community here.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like from the outside looking in that it is really it's being spearheaded, and the heavy lifting and the really difficult literal, physical, emotional stuff is done by locals. And people all the way out here in California, you get the news through so many filters of bias or agenda or whatever. And you both made mention of Leah did in her comments about getting past political or people's convictions to work together. And Andy, and in that beautiful post you made a couple weeks ago, you're talking about the neighbor woman conversation you had in line where she shared ideas and theories that you used the term conspiracy or misinformation, yet you were able to meet her where she was and talk about the efforts of her husband and how much you admire what he's invested into this recovery. So here we are, a divided country, the election in the rearview mirror, yet you are living the antithesis of that. You are discarding the divisions for like a common goal and unity and recovery. And I wanted to just kind of hone in on that and say, is that something that you feel like everybody shares, that sort of unity, and that in that effort, is that contagious there, or is that just your perspective? Because I mean, it's a microcosm of a world we want to live in, where we're working together to rebuild ourselves. Yet it seems like really far away from what a lot of us are experiencing on the day-to-day in the rest of America. So I was curious, like, just if we can unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, Leah, you cool if I jump in and then pass to you?
Yeah, do it. Do it.
I also get afraid to follow Leah because then I.
Nah.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing it up. I think one thing that I heard recently was like despair can be self-fulfilling, and emotion is totally valid. I think however you look at it, to be in a state of shock for any event or just being put in check of what you thought you understood well, and all of a sudden being surprised by what others might be believing in or following or voting for. And I think in a similar way, what Leah and I were sharing earlier is like, because we've had the opportunity to actually show up in the way we have, I would honestly say that being able to volunteer has been self-fulfilling. It's like helped my own grieving. It's been like my own medicine to be able to be out there as often as I can, to be reminded of the potential of humanity when it's united through compassion. And if I didn't have that opportunity, I would probably spiral into losing some hope. And so I think it's a lot easier for folks who are out of the state to pontificate or to come up with narratives and to retweet and to share and comment and kind of put things together. And even people who are here who maybe aren't showing up in the community or maybe weren't heavily impacted. I just spoke to someone yesterday and he wasn't very heavily impacted. There's a lot of great work, with regenerative agriculture and affordable housing, but he's like, I just had to check out. I haven't really been able to follow. And he had his own theories about stuff. He admitted that it was toxic and didn't know where it was coming from. But I think with any life experience, unless you're able to really have the lived experience or speak to those who are really going through it, spreading anything that might not be true is only a burden to those who are on the ground doing the work every day, especially for the folks who we've been working with in Marshall. They just spoke about this in an article in the newspaper of whether it be about the contamination of the water or the mud being toxic. They are depending on 200 to 300 volunteers to show up every day. And these are common folks from out of state, from in-state. As soon as these theories start spreading without scientific data backing to back it up, it really has detrimental effect on what they need to have, which is emergent and it's community-led. And so I just want to raise that because it's good for us to be critical thinkers. And it's also good for us to just put ourselves in check about what am I maybe having unintended consequences of really moving necessary items, relief, support, resources to those who are in most need.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I guess I would add, I mean, it's not utopian by any means here. It's probably easy to look at it from afar and just be like, wow, everyone has just rallied for the cause, and they have actually, but that doesn't make it an incredibly easeful situation all the time. There are a lot of differing political opinions, and there are a lot of different perspectives on, the storm, the response to the storm, how to best maneuver the aid that's coming. But I will say, and I really agree with Fyfe wholeheartedly, what happens when you're sort of in a silo of your own thought, or just sort of engaging with the world via the internet or via social media, it's amazing how quickly you can get tunnel vision and feel tremendous anxiety and kind of get pulled into 1,000 different conspiracy theories. And I don't doubt that some of the things that are spinning around on the internet have their validity, but I also feel like if all of these folks who are spending excessive amounts of time kind of digging into those conspiracies as detectives to try and get to the bottom of it, if they all showed up on the ground and just picked up a shovel, regardless of how or why or where we got here, we would have a tremendously fuller, deeper, denser impact on the ground. And that's kind of what I've tried to communicate to a lot of my people, a lot of my friends, and folks from all different walks of life and all different walks of perspective, is like, yes, stir those pots and ask those questions a little bit, but also, where are you showing up locally? Where are you plugging your resources? Where are you plugging your mental bandwidth? Where is your energy going? Because you're going to feel better, you're going to feel more connected, and you're going to feel way more faith in humanity if you just go up and have conversations with folks and plug in and support each other. And I think those of us that are lucky enough or able to engage in that way, we don't have time for the rest of it. We're making and deepening relationships and hands on the ground and able to actually participate in rebuilding. And I would advocate for that 100 times over to anyone listening anywhere in the world. No matter where you stand, no matter what's going on in your community. If you show up and work side by side and shoulder to shoulder with folks who are needing support, and you have those conversations face to face, so much more can get accomplished than all of the sort of spinning of the wheels that happen in the silos of the internet. So it's a choice, I think, that we have made, and it's kept us, I think, a lot more engaged and faith-based in the direction of this wild and crazy spinning earth. So it's my 2 cents on that one.
No, it's much appreciated and very salient. And from the outside looking in, it's really inspiring. I'm somebody who can get walled up in those silos myself from time to time, and just witnessing the collaboration and the connection and the, rising above it, even from afar, is inspiring. It's something I'd like to, both shine a light on as an example of how we can be bigger humans, and also port some of that into our day-to-day lives, even not in disaster response. So we had Ryan Rising at Halloween the other day, and he talked about regenerative disaster response, and couldn't help but talk about just putting down the political arms and just like being a community. And it's all kind of rooted in that same like villaging mindset that I've gleaned from so many of you over the years. We only have about 10 more minutes, and I'm really grateful for your time. So I'm going to leave with 2 questions, and you can handle them however you see fit. One is, I want to drive people to action. I mean, a big part of doing this is, now that we've had the election and political stuff and whatever, this has sort of become, back burner news for the rest of the country, even though it's still a very acute situation there. So I wanted to hear from people with boots on the ground about the mutual aid networks and ways that we can, fiscally or energetically or amplification support the continued work that the community members are engaging in on a day-to-day basis, like both of you. And I'd also like just to hear a little bit about how you're finding time for music. I know, Leah, you're forming a little bit again here and there, jetting in and out. I know, Fyfe, you've came out to the Bay Area to perform. You've got something this weekend with Desert Dwellers. So yeah, talk about how we can help and act, and also just making time for art.
Oh, art is my favorite. I try and make time for art because it only because it gives me fuel, and that's my excuse, but it's also my motivator. So the creative side of things, being able to play music for tired volunteers and leaning into a little bit of songwriting around what it feels like to see the water rise. I mean, that's just the stuff that gives us fuel. We've been able to do some street painting of street signs, which Fyfe and Chloe initiated, and we've all been able to kind of jump in and just add some visual art to the community, and that's been really beautiful. It just kind of keeps us fueled. Boots on the ground, though, what I would say is that we went through our first tier, the sort of first wave of tons of donations and tons of volunteers, all the way to the point where it was almost an overwhelm, an influx. We almost had too much, and that's settled down. Things have gotten organized again. The volunteers have all sort of gone home, and it's become a trickle. And I do think we're about ready to put the call out for that wave of support to come in, the second tier, for volunteers with hard skills, for the builders and the electricians and laborers to start to consider spending some time here, doing some rebuilding, tiny home building. Some of the demolition crews are going to need support. There's still going to be need for cleanup crews, and second wave, second tier donations, which is something we'll be trying to organize as best we can on the ground as well. But yeah, we're about ready for the second wave, and hopefully there's going to be ways to keep folks involved and to keep a bit of a spotlight on this region, as it's going to be a real long haul for the rebuild. And it's a very powerful region. You know, it's one of the most biodiverse areas of the country, and there's a massive amount of herbalism and folk culture here, and it's going to really need and be deserving of attention in as patient and as committed a way as we can conjure. So hand the mic back over to Fyfe, and it's really a great call to action just to be able to have these conversations together and to lean on each other for our own perspectives and insight. And thanks for calling us to the table.
Thank you for making time and sharing the experience and your efforts. And we've got you, and we're going to do our best to support from near and far. So thank you, Leah.
I think it's a call for like big thinkers and small acts of kindness at the same time. You know, like I come from 15 years of the B Corp world, working for the nonprofit B Lab, and that was completely dismantling or rethinking how the capitalistic economic system has exploited our resources and our communities. And that's big thinking. I would say that it was revolutionary. And there's going to be that same need for that type of revolutionary approach to what Western North Carolina and Florida are both going through right now. Because to Leah's point, what Beloved is really focused on is really towards more equitable, just housing and society. It's not just this warehouse of trying to get all these supplies out to community. It's a long-term vision. And I think it's at that stage of needing to apply that big thinking of what does constructive capital and regenerative design and all that really look like to support these great organizations that are hugely heartfelt, super committed to what they're doing, and they are a very small team of individuals. And so if you're an accountant, you're a CFO, you are in between careers because you design business plans, this is your call. This is your call to step in and say, how can I help? How can I apply what I've learned through a very different world to make sure that these efforts are longstanding and that stamina is real, and that these change makers are supported through this, through all these different stages that Leah mentions. I also just want to call out that holidays are coming up. So those small acts of kindness, I discovered a music producer out here I had no idea about. I really dig his music. I had no idea he was based here. And he put out a post saying, honestly, I hate to say it, but if anybody could just buy my Bandcamp, I really need to get my feet on the ground because I have lost half of my revenue going into next year for all my gigs. Anything like that, just seek out artists, printmakers, musicians, whoever it is, and just think about your holiday shopping or whatever you can do, because even just any of those little lift ups can be really powerful for folks who are here.
Right on. Yeah, I've been trying to identify different artists, musicians, creators in that region, and if we can do so, maybe we'll have a little list here in the show notes of different ways you can, from afar, you can purchase, you can make, ways you can support artists, etc. And some of the other guests on this pod are closely connected to the community as well, and through iamAVL and the Asheville Music Hall, and of course, everything Rising Appalachia. I did wanted to, since you brought up, some of your previous endeavors relative to B Corp, I have to say, and I said it on the introduction before you came on, that was how I found out about your work. Obviously, we met socially on the playa, but finding out about B Corp and your mission, I've always had a tremendous amount of admiration for the work, the effort, the ideas, and like what you brought to the business world from a very righteous place. So how does that mindset and that sort of, I want to say the modus operandi, or just the way that you approached the behemoth of capitalism, you sort of still have a similar chaotic, bureaucratic mess with disaster recovery. So how does your experience with B Corp inform, your boots on the ground work with Helene?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think similar to what Leah was saying earlier, it's a lot easier for us just to point at issues, and it takes an extra gravitas or just perspective to not just settle for issues, but to be able to look at viable solutions. And so anything that can tinker or just show or inspire a different path forward is really what B Corp is about, is an experiment. And I would say that right now, better or for worse, this is a really opportunity for experiment of how community can be rebuilt and how elected officials can represent their constituency. And so I guess my call to action is, for B Corps, they stand for racial justice and climate justice. And this is a really opportune moment for that business community to step up. Because if they're going to be leaders in this economic system, particularly right now during this political climate, this is an opportunity for them to show care and to ask, how can they be helpful? Because there are some B Corps here who are heavily hit, like East Fork Pottery and French Brought Chocolate. And this is an opportunity for not just the business community to come together, but also for businesses outside of this region to just ask and see what can be done together that otherwise a lot of these businesses are left off to do alone.
Oh yeah, man, that's really great, and I think that's a good spot for us to hop off. We got about 2 minutes left on the meeting, so I just wanted to ask if you could let people know, if they're inspired and activated by this conversation, by this podcast, what's the first stop? Give us a website or just a place to go for the next step.
Rising Appalachia has about 8 organizations listed on our webpage that all have GoFundMes, including Beloved Asheville, including NanoSeed, which is doing a lot of work in Madison County, including a lot of the folks with the River Arts District. So that's an easy place to at least start the research. You can just go to our homepage, it's risingappalachia.com. We're also working on a compilation album that is hopefully going to be released before Thanksgiving. That is all incredible music donated by artists from all around the country, including lots of folks you're going to know of. I'll keep a lot of it a secret, but that's going to be 100% donation-based compilation album that's all going to relief work here. So that's a few points of immediate activation, and then Fyfe, what else would you plug in as far as getting folks in the door and well-informed and well-connected?
I think that's it. I would maybe just touch on the heart. So I'd say follow Beloved Asheville on Instagram. If you're on Instagram, honestly, if you're just looking for some stories of hope, like they're posting 4 or 5 of them every day in a way that's just so beautiful and heartfelt and real. And so if you're finding any sense of loss or just looking for that reminder of what community can do when they're pushed up against the wall, Beloved Asheville is telling those stories every day. And the last thing I'd say is, I think the most common thing I heard from people when I would meet them after all this is they would say, unfortunate given the circumstances, or I wish the circumstances were different. And I guess my reminder to everybody is, if you got a neighbor 3 houses down you never met, just go down, knock on the door, introduce yourself, because you just never know when something like this might happen. It's nice to have a little bit of relationship before you lean on community.
Amazing. Thank you both so much for your time and energy. So grateful, and can't wait to get this out to the people. Many blessings to you both. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Everything feels a little bit crazy here. It's been a wild few months. I'm back home in beautiful southern Appalachia and boots on the ground, slowly figuring out all of our relief work. And I also wanted to let folks know I'm going to be doing a small solo tour over in Europe, just going to be in Ireland and Portugal. So looking forward to playing some music while bringing my dear friend Duncan Wickle with me. So we'll be traveling as a duo, and we'll see you at the top of December if you're around, and spread the word over to the motherlands. And this is an old song I wrote. It feels aptly very real again. Every morning a trip to the river, wild rushing water never fails to deliver. This life is falling while everything is stalling. Take a deep breath, lean into the fall, and it's all that we ask for, but it really never looked like this. Don't sit back now and don't be dismissive. We're sitting in the mystery, real life living history. No one's really sure if it's apocalypse or victory. And no one's really sure if it's apocalypse or victory.
I said 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps back. I gotta push on when life is on the attack. Life is on the attack. You know that moment when you finally get a sweet new.
All right. I want to say thank you to Leah and Andy Fyfe for that thoughtful and illuminating and emotional and all the things conversation. And shout out to Chloe, Leah's sister, and Andy's sweetie. Love you so much. And really grateful that you all persevered the way you did and are just paying it forward and reaching out, helping others and leading by example. And another person who's doing similar things, had a different experience, but also harrowing, and that at the same time is fully invested in the recovery and the rebound of Asheville. And that's my man Josh Blake from iamAVL, from Granola Funk Express, aka GFE. Josh Blake, solo artist, host of Tuesday Night Funk Jam, a very talented engineer and producer at Echo Mountain Studios, and also a good buddy of mine for a long time now. So naturally, Josh was actually on the pod during the pandemic episodes when I would have like 4 different short interviews checking in with people how they were doing in the pandemic. So it was only natural that I was going to reach out to him for something of this nature, another sort of current events, cultural temperature taking, if you will. And me and Josh talked for a really long time, and I even edited it down just a tad, but he gave me so much good stuff and it was so passionate from the heart that it was really hard to trim it down. So this one's a little longer, equally enlightening and illuminating as the one we just heard and the ones that are to come. So without any further ado, my man Josh Blake is going to take us 1 step forward.
Get you off track, get you off track. I said 1 step forward, 2 steps back, 2 steps back. I gotta push on. Life is on the attack.
Right on, right on. Well, we initially had plans to do a pod with Josh Blake, iamAVL, Granola Funk Express, Josh Blake Music. He's been on the pod before, and we talked about doing something after the GFE reunion show in September, but before we could get around doing that, Mother Nature had other plans. Josh is, part of the heartbeat of the Asheville music community and, a parent to amazing kids, a husband, father, and a very, beloved mover and shaker in that community. So since I wanted to do this episode kind of dedicated on telling the stories of people who live through that experience, and especially in the greater music community, festival community, I had to start with Josh. iamAVL has been a partner of this podcast. Josh and I have been friends for a very long time. So, hey, Josh, great to see your face and hear your voice. Welcome back to the Upful Life podcast, and unfortunately under less than ideal circumstances. So let's start with, where am I talking to you from?
Yeah, man. Well, thanks for having me. Likewise, always a pleasure to see and hear you too, brother. And yeah, we'll get to that other episode in the future. But, today actually I am at Tybee Island, in Georgia. We actually left Asheville for the first time since the hurricane to take a breath. So we came down here for a couple of days. We had some friends who had an extra room at their house, and, this was an opportunity for us to kind of get away for a minute and do a little quick energetic reset and take a deep breath, and then get ready to go back and continue to do the work we got to do to get town back on its feet.
Yeah, man. I mean, everybody who made it through that deserves a holiday and vacation. So I'm glad you're getting some R&R with your wife and Tybee. We mentioned off the air, my friend Katie's mom donated to that charity auction that we recently did. So yeah,
It's absolutely crushed, man. You guys killed it.
dude, hey, the people, the community rose up, and I saw that, not to get sidetracked, I saw that was happening sort of in the Pretty Lights community, and I said, hey, can we join forces? I got people in other places, and then it took on a life of its own, man. And at first I just thought it was something I could do with my time to have a direct impact, because it was going to Beloved and Brother Wolf, and those were organizations that yourself and numerous others were co-signing. But then it just became almost like a job for a few days, like just communicating and getting donations and talking to people out there and spreading the word. And at the end of it, yeah, we were really proud. And it's just a drop in the bucket to what's needed, whether it's listeners to this podcast or people in the music community. Asheville is a huge part of this thing of ours, La Cosa Nostra. I was thinking about it. It's peers with like Denver and New Orleans and Brooklyn and the Bay Area, and it's this tiny little mountain town, and the hollers in every direction. But the people and the music and the culture that emanates from that region is unlike anywhere else. And we felt that we because we love y'all so much, we felt what y'all were going through. I know my wife has family from there, and we all both have dear friends, and it was excruciating. So, the auction is just one thing, but part of the reason we're doing this podcast is to kind of just raise awareness of the enormity of what happened, and also the length of time and the efforts that it's going to take to rebuild. And, people look back to something like New Orleans and Katrina, and while that's comparable in terms of the severity and the sort of, once in a century kind of thing, that's a major metropolitan city with a whole lot of industry and tourism and population and all kinds of stuff that doesn't apply here. So I'm going to ask you as little or as much as you want to take us through your lived experience, both on that day in September when the shit hit the fan, and also like the aftermath. Because people see stuff on the news and they talk to people, but to hear a first person narrative, that's what this show is. This is going to be a handful of oral history of this catastrophe. So I know it's not fun, but I think it's important. Right. If we're going to ask people to donate, they need to know what the fuck went down.
Yeah, man. And I mean, that's incredible. Like you guys did with that auction, and really just, I can say, like, from my perspective, and I know a lot of people, especially in different industries all over Asheville, have felt the generosity and the empathy that y'all, the people that our friends in other places have been sharing. It's been really incredible, the outpouring of support and love and concern. And I mean, that part about it has been really beautiful. I mean, it's like the thing that we know, La Cosa Nostra, it's like we're all here for each other one way or another, and we see that and feel that all the time. But when there's something that strikes so deep and so hard to the community, it's been really uplifting to see the way people like yourselves have been organizing and brainstorming and thinking of ways to help out the town. And you're right, it is a small town compared to a lot of cities, although be it, growing a lot and developing a lot in the past 10, 15 years. And of course, a lot of top 10 lists. And, like you said, it has a really incredible and unique music scene for a city of its size. Absolutely ridiculous, to be honest with you. And I think one of the things that you know, really helps us in that regard, is that, yeah, there's a great awareness because you have bands from all over the world, country, who come through Asheville and they feel that what a special place it is. And so whether they live here or not, they know, like, hey man, this cool little mountain town, like, dang, there's some cool fucking people there. There's some cool stuff going on. And we feel for them. So that's been really nice. Just to know that folks like you are out there helping us, and willing to help the city, recover. As for my personal experience, man, I mean, to be completely honest, dude, like, this shit really blindsided me. I was at the end of a 5-day studio session, with a band called Sneezy out of Chicago. I really love Sneezy. This is maybe my 3rd time recording with them. And this time we were doing like a full record, and, anybody who's like, been involved in studio environments, and for me, especially like on the engineering tip, like there is like hyper focus, right? So you're in the building from the beginning, and my attention is really just on what we're doing and trying to make sure that we're navigating the recording, properly, that we're getting all the things we need done, working computers. And I'm usually in the building in the morning, and I'm not gone until it's like dark out. So I don't see what's on like when we're on sessions like that, what's really happening outside. So, I heard it was raining the last couple of days. Oh, it's raining. Then you step outside. You're like, oh yeah, it was raining. Like when you're walking in your car. And I heard that there was, potential for a big storm, but our session ended Thursday night. I got home around 11 o'clock, and it was raining, but I didn't know what was coming at all. So that's my personal experience. Marisa, my wife, had moved. She's like, I moved some stuff to the middle of the basement. And I was like, okay. She's like, I also got some water because they said we should probably get some fresh water to drink. I don't know. She's like, I went to the grocery store. All the food was gone. I was like, that's weird. So, in Asheville, especially, people tend to freak out when there's any sort of weather related event because, well, first of all, usually it's during the winter, and we don't have infrastructure built to deal with snowstorms. We don't have big snow plows and things like that. So people are used to, like, if there's something coming, everything flies off the shelves. And she said that was the scene at the store. And I was like, really? For like a rainstorm, But we live in a neighborhood. It's a relatively wooded neighborhood, and we have several big trees on our property, pine trees, oak trees, old oak trees that, like, we've seen them in storms before, waving back and forth, and we're like, hope it doesn't, fall this way. And, this was the first time living in that house in 17 years where she woke up. It's like 3 a.m, woke me up. She's like, let's go sleep downstairs. Cause we're like upstairs, right? So it was we were concerned about the trees, and we went downstairs, and I fell back asleep, but I woke up about 6:30 in the morning and just heard it raging outside. And I looked outside, and I mean, bro, I was like, holy shit. Like, I went out, and there was so much water coming down off of the back of our property into like where our back patio is, that it created a small, like, 3 inches of water there. Like we were building a swimming pool on our back patio. The water was raging. The trees were left and right blowing everywhere. I walked up into my backyard, and I saw 3 giant trees down. I saw trees from my neighbor's yard and my yard. And I was like, holy shit. Like, this is insane. I can't believe that this is, and you're going to hear a lot of that. I know, like, people have been running out of words how to describe the magnitude of the destruction but it was really like, I felt like, I don't know, that War of the Worlds movie or something where Tom Cruise walks out and all of a sudden there's aliens coming out of the ground, and you're just like, what the fuck is actually happening? I had put on my swimming trunks and ran outside because I was like, I got to get out there and try to mitigate this water issue, So I started running the backyard to grab logs to try to make it, block the water so it's going a different direction. But then trees would start cracking, and I was running back inside, and I was at that for about an hour back and forth trying to sort of secure our house from water, and eventually woke up my wife. And at that point, it was still raining, but it had calmed down a little bit. And I threw on some shit kickers, and I got out and I was like, I'm walking around the neighborhood. I saw these trees down in my yard. I was like, I've got to make sure my neighbors don't have trees on their houses. And so I'm walking up the block, and it was really felt like, again, like a sort of apocalyptic movie. There's trees down on cars. There's trees across the road. And all of a sudden, my neighbor like pulling chains out to try to like yank a tree out of the way to see if we can make a path on the road, but you couldn't get one tree out of the way without there being another one. And I'm in a neighborhood. It's not even like I'm up in the mountain hollers where some of these people had to completely rebuild their roads to their houses for like a week before they could even get out. Yeah. So we, I mean, that for us, and then of my mom, my mom was a big part of my experience as well. She has an apartment near us. But it is on the other side of the Swannanoa River. So the Swannanoa River is a river that feeds into the North French Broad, but I would say that there was some of the hardest hit. One of the hardest hit areas that we know about was Swannanoa, which is the town that is right next to East Asheville, where I live. And this river runs through Swannanoa out of a town called Black Mountain, and then it gains steam as it comes towards the French Broad, where it goes by the Biltmore and it dumps into the French Broad River. My mom's on the other side of that river in an apartment, and the next thing I did once I realized we weren't going to be able to get the car anywhere, we knocked one tree out the way. I tried to get out the neighborhood, but you could tell there's trees everywhere. So there was no texting or calling either. Every text, every call. So this is a, real moment of, like, for some people, uncertainty, panic, this and that. A text from my mom came through saying that she had been evacuated. I don't know how it got through my wife, and she was at this, parking lot up from her place. And I was like, okay, tell her to stay there. I'm going to try to get there. So I went down towards where the river is, thinking, I'm just going to be able to, figure out a way to get around this river somewhere. But dude, that thing it exploded. I mean, I don't even know, dude, like 10 times its width. So like the bottom of the hill there is the golf course, and it had completely swallowed up the entire front nine of the golf course. Running at, I mean, the water was rushing so fast. I couldn't, it was, again, I could not believe what my eyes were seeing. I was watching semi trucks floating past me. I was watching Manna Food Bank, which Manna Food Bank is right across the golf course there, and they do a ton of work in our area to feed malnourished children and people. Their building was like, there's a giant warehouse was halfway underwater. Their trucks were starting to drift. And I look across the other side of the golf course and I see this tree that had, I don't know, dude, 250, 300 years old, like this giant tree just topple. And that was the thing that hit me the hardest, honestly, was in that moment, seeing a tree that had existed for hundreds of years not surviving this moment. And I was like, oh my God, like this is crazy. This is insane. And so now we're like, how do we get grandma? Where do we find her from? She had gotten taken down to the arena downtown, where they were basically sheltering people who needed to be evacuated from their situations. Turns out she was in a second-story apartment, which is adjacent to that river. She said they woke her up at 3 a.m. and said, we're evacuating people on the bottom floor because the parking lot's getting a little wet, but you should be fine. And they banged down her door, she said, at 6 a.m, and she walked out of her apartment onto a boat from the second floor, and that's how she was evacuated. We found her down there later that afternoon after we spent a good 4 hours or so with the neighbors, like old fashioned. I'm swinging the axe, you swing the axe, ching, 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 really the whole neighborhood out there trying to clear a path. And we finally got a way to get out of our neighborhood. And that's when we were able to drive and find her, which we did. And still, I think no cell service, no anything. I think at that point we were near the studio, Echo Mountain, where I work at. So I drove by the studio. I was like, I'm going to see if there's any power at the studio. And I ran inside, and the studio had power and the studio had internet. And I think I threw a Facebook post up at that point being like, holy shit, this is crazy. There's no communication or something. I said something, and I got back in the car, and then we decided to drive, which in hindsight was maybe dumb. I mean, we drove over the bridge that goes over the French Broad River into this giant parking lot called Westgate parking lot, where you can kind of look over the French Broad River. And we sat there got out of the car, and there was about a dozen people or so there, including a couple of my dear friends from a venue called the Salvage Station, who were up there to look at what the river was doing. And again, indescribable, watching full buildings floating downstream. And looking, of course, we could see the Salvage Station, which is a really wonderful, amazing venue here that was, because of a Department of Transportation plan that was set in motion like 20 years ago. They were being forced to leave their property at the end of this year. But this is not how they wanted to go, man. I had 2 gigs there. Also, myself, this coming up, we were all really excited about, and but I sat there with my homies from the Salvage Station. I was like, dude, and they were like, we put up some floodgates, but they were like, 4.5, 5 feet tall. Like, this is not, and yeah. So that venue, we were just looking at it completely underwater. At that point, we knew this was massive, but it took, honestly, days for information to get out. For most of the people living in Asheville, nobody really knew the severity of the flood until a few days later, because there was no communications. People were struggling just to be able to get a text to their loved ones, letting them know that they're okay. And yeah, that was my initial experience. So I went from being in the super blissful space, like completing this project with this great band, to absolute utter chaos, in the next morning. So that was my initial experience for the first day. I know I just talked for a long time, but that was that whole first, whatever, 8, 10, 12 hours for us. And of course went back home, and we had mom. And we just no power, no water, and just being like, okay, what do we do now? So we did our regular when power goes out, light some candles, hope things come back on, but yeah, nothing. So we ended up, lucky for us, access to Echo Mountain the next day. We went there. So we went there to have electricity to be able to text people. And before you knew it, Echo Mountain and all the affiliated engineers and people who work there, we were all kind of bunkered down there for a few days. Not all of us sleeping there, but kind of hanging there, bringing what food we had from our refrigerators, because, everything's going bad, and trying to figure out what the next move was for everybody's individual situations. I mean, some people's properties, their roads were washed out, so they couldn't get to the house, stuff like that. Just, yeah. I'll take a break. Sorry, man, I'm just blabbing about it, but that was a lot of it right there.
Yeah, I was going to say no sorries, man, especially here, man. We are here for all of it. And at the same time, it's excruciating to live it through your recollections, knowing you and the people affected the way I do, to think of the level of surprise and chaos and fear and just everything before you even realize what the fuck happened, just in those hours of, who can blame you for being caught off guard, whether it's the reputation of it being a quote climate haven, or just the science of elevation and where the water is. And I mean, there's everything that had to go wrong for this to happen. It's why it doesn't happen. Forget 100 years, 1,000 years. So I struggle to convey empathy and just sadness. And I say that obviously just because people died and people lost their homes and their businesses and their communities, I mean, on itself, but also the fact that you're a resourceful people and prepared people by nature. That's why you go live in a ruralish place or further off the beaten path. I mean, if anyone even had a modicum of understanding of what was even conceivably possible, I know for damn sure a number of y'all would have taken proactive steps. The fact that this snuck up on people and in the way it did, where you were, just moving stuff around in the basement, or, I imagine the Salvage Station putting up the flood wall. It seemed like an extreme move,
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
normal stuff, it's like, really, fucking 5 foot football? You crazy,
Yeah.
right? But it's like, it was not any match, and I've watched some breakdown videos of like actually quote unquote how it happened, and out of the realm of what you could imagine. And so then being thrust into go mode, like immediately, and involving your own mother.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, just the layers.
It was definitely you watch
chaos.
you watch those movies and you're like, you see them, the apocalypse movies or whatever, and then all of a sudden you're in one and you're like, what the fuck, dude? It was like that, man. And
actually get to close your eyes and get any shut eye before you in turn realized the depth of the destruction, or was it just immediate around the clock reaction?
dude, I think that I was absolutely personally in survival mode for about the first 72 hours or so, even a little further, because there was an issue of like, okay, if we run out of water, if we run out of, food, where are we sourcing this? And honestly, like we were so trying to just figure out what to do to where's my friends? Where's everybody at? Is everybody okay? What do they need? Like that. I think that I definitely had a moment where yeah, man, I got back to the studio at one point. It might have been day 3, day 4. And I tried to record a video message about what I'd been seeing around town. And I absolutely lost my shit, bro. I had hit my emotional, wall or whatever. And I just sat there, with my head in my hands, bawling, thinking about all the things that like I hadn't even seen yet. I had seen the river and how high it was, but starting to process it and be like, yeah, people didn't know, bro, at first. The communication, the lack of internet, lack of cell service, especially lack of cell service, most people couldn't even hear from their friends what they were seeing on the news. And yeah, I had the moment where I had a very distinct moment where everything hit me and I started to think about, oh my God, dude, there are people who are dead from this. There are homes that have been washed away. I saw that building get washed away. I don't know where this ended. I don't know. Thinking of somebody's like, Chimney Rock's gone. I'm like, Chimney Rock's gone? What do you mean Chimney Rock's gone? This is a town like that's like built kind of on a river, on the other side of one of the hills from us. And yeah, the whole town got completely washed away. And that was not something that we could even really comprehend for the first few days.
How could you? Like, how could you actually conceive of a town getting washed away? I mean, it's beyond comprehension. So you're not like out of line for that. I think that it's important for people to understand that the enormity of what happened and how just rare and so for people, there was nothing that could be done, but then you got to respond, you got to react. And I think that that's where the story turns from tragic and catastrophic to inspiring. The way, I don't even want to get into how it's been politicized and all that fucking
I will tell you what, none of us in Asheville really know about it.
Good.
We have heard that this tragedy has been politicized, but like we were all so disconnected from social media and news and everything for the majority, for almost like 2 weeks. And unless you really went to try to figure out how to connect somewhere, that like we heard it was becoming a political thing, but like none of us know about it. You know what I mean?
It's not important. I just wanted to kind of say like, that's not the type of thing that I want to give energy or attention to, because that's not the story. The story is the boots on the ground and the villaging and the community coalescing. And honestly, it's been stunning. And, just before we talked, you talk about breaking down. I mean, you have every reason to break down, not sleeping for 3 days, like, saving people, trying to pick up the pieces. Like, I was just trying to record the script you sent me for, to help get some attention to the Musicians Relief Fund, which, I'm putting it on podcasts, like as if it were an ad. And there'll be links in the show notes for anybody who's curious about that. But,
thank you for that.
Just hey man, that's just least we could do. But I was just saying, like, I haven't finished it. I had 3 takes before we got on this, and I put on Rising Appalachia Resilience, because they're so closely connected. They've been out there with y'all, and just listening to the lyrics to that song while I read your words, and just couldn't get through it 3 times. So I figure now that we talk, I'm gonna come back to it, and it'll probably be fine. And people have heard that in the beginning of the episode that they're going to hear this on. But I wanted to kind of turn, because it doesn't have to be like just the trauma, and people are going to tell a bunch of versions of the story you just did.
Right.
So I want to hear, because we're trying to rally people. What are you doing, Josh Blake? What is iamAVL doing? What is the music community doing? I know you set up a concert series. I know Cactus is doing stuff. So if you could tell the listeners, like, if they've listened this long, they know shit's fucked up, and there's a long, hard road out of this hell. But you have an amazing community and team and capable people and organizations, and money's being raised. So let's talk about the recovery, the response and recovery. Like, just your perspective, like, and the Musicians Relief Fund and iamAVL's role.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, I think that one of the things that needs to be made clear is that Asheville, at least the modern incarnation of it, is a place that was so attractive to so many people because it has such a great sense of community. It's not just that there's waterfalls, is beautiful scenery. It's not just the food culture or the beer or the music or whatever. It's because Asheville really feels like it's a place where everybody's trying to have each other's back, especially when we were there in the late 90s. It was like you pretty much knew everybody that you saw downtown. All of a sudden your friend is opening this business. Everybody in the like kind of new people is very tight knit. And so for that reason, it's not super shocking, the community's response and the willingness of everybody to kind of chip in the best way that they're able to, because that is literally one of the elements of our city that has attracted people to it. And so for that, I think we all can be very grateful. There's a lot of areas where, I mean, I've heard multiple stories of FEMA agents or relief workers being like, I have never seen a community respond in this way to a natural disaster, where you have, and you bring politics up. And I think that's one of the things that, we can focus on just briefly in a way where, like, politics no longer mattered to anybody living here. Like, you have people of all different belief systems, scrambling through mountainsides to try to find other people. You have people dropping their work for weeks down in neighboring counties just to come up here to try to help. Relief aid from all different types of walks of life, faiths, people from other countries. And, I think humans helping humans is kind of the thing, and so, it's been really beautiful to watch that part of it. And I think that people, gravitated to doing what they can do best to help the community. And we spoke a little bit off camera there, or off recording, about, the survivor's guilt. I have plenty of friends who were out of town when this happened, doing a gig, or like now they're not ready to come back yet because they're trying to figure out the best way that they can re-enter and help. And, but also I have friends who are like, hey, I just had a baby 3 months ago. We have no running water, electricity to our house. We're leaving town, but also feeling like, how can I help? I feel bad that I'm not there shoveling mud. You know what I mean? And everybody in town who cares about it realizes the level of destruction, and that they want to help somehow. And, one of the things that I don't know that it necessarily gets a lot of airtime. I know Beloved does get a lot of airtime, and they've gotten a ton of support. And, I was able to go down there and help out, one day. And, but they, our friends down there started this whole thing where, like, they have to help. We realized early on, hey, there's a lot of senior citizens here in these older living homes, and we need to help them flush their toilets. And so something as simple as that, like getting gray water and building teams of community members to to fill as much gray water as they can in these 5-gallon buckets and drive them to these places. And this is not like because we're trying to like make sure, well, yeah, while you're there, you're doing wellness checks. You're making sure they have the food and water they need. But really the thing is like, let's make sure these people flush their toilets so they're not living in unsanitary and potentially toxic conditions. People, you know, when we were starting to get allowed to go back into the River Arts District where so much destruction happened, like people, going down there, getting dressed up in hazmat suits because there's the mud and everything is so toxic, and going to work and shoveling out people's studios and trying to help them recover whatever they have. I mean, there's endless stories of selfless, service surrounding this tragedy. And, Asheville, you know, really is very fortunate to be a community where that exists. It's gonna be a very long road ahead for us. And I say that, with some pain in my heart, bro. It's like we have lost, there's parts of town where you wouldn't, you know, downtown is fine, right? Like there's maybe a couple trees down, but like there's areas where there are things that were so special to members of our community that have been completely wiped off the map. And do we even ever rebuild there again? And then how do we recover economically? You know, October is one of the busiest months in Asheville for business. It's leaf season when the leaves are changing. You know, music's in full swing. All the artists have a bunch of shows going on, to sell their paintings, pottery, stuff like that. And having October, be this is really challenging economically. And then that's just this month. And it's going to take a long time for people to rebuild. I think, not until about, I feel like it was, man, dude, it was almost like, I mean, I went down to the River Arts District on day 2 just to see, but the waters were still so high. They were still, the salvage station was underwater. I got as close to it as I could. And we had to wait for everything to recede. We had to wait for, this is really horrible, bro. But you had to wait for properties to get cleared because they were pulling bodies out of the back of different buildings down there, before the recovery ever could even begin, for people's own personal property. And, I didn't really, dude, I went to go get, I mean, the first 3 days, bro, like, yeah, Lord of the Flies, man. One gas station has gas, you know, people are getting shot. Like, the grocery stores aren't open. It's nuts. And I remember one day I pulled out of our neighborhood. I'm going to go this way to try to find some gas for the generator. And I took a right to go towards Swannanoa, not knowing because of no cell service and everything. And we got to the bridge that goes into Swannanoa and it was fucking gone, bro. And like the buildings were gone and we had no idea that this was how bad it was. And it is about 10 days later where I finally got a chance. Things had dried up enough where I got to ride a bike around some of these areas and witness, the amount of debris, which is really honestly the biggest, besides the rebuilding of the economy and the businesses and, the debris, is I don't know how you clean up that much mess, man. There's full houses from towns away that floated downstream and there's still over 750 missing people on the list of missing persons that people have not found or contacted yet. And there's people going out every day still into all these hollers trying to find people. And we have a lot to do. It's been, it's hard to imagine or take in, even when you see it with your own eyes. But it's been really heartwarming to see the community's response to it. Just to know that everybody wants the best for each other, regardless of who they are, what they believe in, all these things. That's kind of the community response. Me personally, I did a little bit of work at the beginning, of course, taking care of my family, went to Beloved, we had a homie come down from, Chattanooga with a ton of supplies that like we got to a bunch of people. We helped get gas in a bunch of people's cars, people working for World Central Kitchen. And, it was for me also on like day 3 or 2 or something. I realized World Central Kitchen was there downtown feeding people for free. And I literally walked in there with my family to eat. And I saw somebody who used to come to Funk Jam and he was like, "Hey man, where's your guitar?" And I went home that night and I was like, you know what? I should bring my guitar down to World Central Kitchen then tomorrow and make some music for everybody. That's like, let's make some, let's put some love and some light into this situation for people. And so we went down there and jammed, and the logistics director loved it and asked us to please stay. And then we stayed and did it again. And then bands started being like, hey, how can I play this? And it kind of snowballed a little bit into like a concert series that's happening down at the World Central Kitchen every day. In the afternoon when everybody's down there to eat. And you know, of course the people working at World Central Kitchen get to take a break and come down and hang out and hear some live music. And we kind of created a little bit of an oasis down there. It's downtown. It's a place people can chill out. And honestly, especially the first week and a half of that series, just watching people come together who hadn't seen each other yet, hugging, crying, sharing stories. It's been a really special place. And also, you know, I mean, my homie, one of my friends, you know, he got up there, he hadn't played music in 11 or 2 weeks or something. He said he blew a sax solo. You could hear him feeling everything he had been feeling. And when he pulled a sax away, like he was bawling, crying, you know what I mean? Like the emotion, the way that we're able to, as musicians, kind of share our experiences. And also we need it. It's therapeutic for us to play. It's therapeutic for people to be around it and be a part of it. Whether it's joyful, whether it's, you know, just it's something that's meant to be a little more emotional. If it's a song somebody wrote, it's an important part of our process when it comes to living through this. And yeah, we were really blessed to kind of set something up there to help people have a place, a little sanctuary in town for a minute, and that's been really nice.
That's important because that's a big part of who you are in that community. You know, hosting the Funk Jam and moving there in the 90s and GFE and everything you've done. And of course, iamAVL, you know, that's who you are. That's your role, to begin with. So to be able to facilitate that and just kind of like have it come together so organically is really beautiful to watch from afar. And on that tip, you know, that was a major stop for a lot of our favorite artists. And look no further than the iamAVL archives. More bands and artists than we can count that come through, you know, on major metropolitan tours from coast to coast. And there's an Asheville gig, and they find their way to Echo Mountain Studios, and there's a ton of great stuff in there. And Josh has been a huge part of facilitating that, both in the community and also behind the mixing boards. So that's obviously, you know, a major lifeblood of the community, and iamAVL is a pioneer in the streaming world. So we want to support y'all as long as it takes to, you know, get the ball rolling in that regard. So we said we're going to do 20 minutes. We're at 40. So I want to wrap up with, it's all good, man. I was thinking, like, I can't even edit any of this because it's all your experiences. And you know what? We have 5 people go on the show, 6 people, and goes a couple hours, you know, so it goes. You know, there's only one Hurricane Helene, so if it takes people a long time to talk, so it goes. And I know that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg. But let's finish up with the Musicians Relief Fund because, you know, people want to know, you know, they're music fans if they're listening to Upful Life podcast. Right. And how can they just directly hit your pockets, and how are you and iamAVL, what's your role in sort of facilitating and distributing?
We actually, I didn't, because survival mode, and also because just trying to wrap my brain around the level of the tragedy, didn't even really think about trying to figure out, you know, I automatically, you know, was bombarded with ideas from different folks around the music community for benefits and things like this. And there's so many things in the works and happening. And there's also plenty of people who are kind of holding off for now as we, like, you know, focus on other recovery efforts. And so there's a lot of that, but I didn't think about how we could use our network or facilitate any sort of, you know, gathering of finances to support the musicians. There's some great arts organizations out there that are set up and doing that solely. That's like their only purpose. For us, it was during the pandemic, where we were leaned on really hard as a streaming service to help musicians continue to be able to share their music with people. And through that, we were able to raise a bunch of money through donations, both during the streams and from people who saw what we were doing. We worked with a few different organizations, to kind of get that into the hands of the local music industry folks. And what happened here was, it wasn't until about, I don't know, maybe again, 10 days into it, when I had started receiving several messages via text from friends, some emails from people holding festivals. We want to help the music industry. So I was like, yes, okay, we should open up. People are hollering at us to help. So we opened up we always are open for donations, but we made a new graphic and we started to promote it and calling it the Music Industry Relief Fund. Honestly, I feel like some of the people in the industry who are being affected the hardest are production workers, gig workers, sound people. Not every musician I know, but plenty of them are still gigging. If you go, 30 minutes outside of town, there's wedding gigs, there's bar gigs. Some people have tours already booked, things like that. It's the production people who had a job at a venue that is no longer there, that are going to really be hurting. It's also the venues themselves who've had to cancel a ton of shows, lose almost a whole month of programming and revenue. And then, of course, there's musicians like myself who have weekly gigs who have lost those as well. So there's a lot of different ways that the music industry is in need. And we have just opened up for people who care and want to help and support the recovery effort. They can donate to us through either Venmo or PayPal. And I think you said you'll have those links up. But one of the things that we did during the pandemic, which I'm pretty sure I'm going to try to do at least with some of the money that we get, is we found a partnership with Ingles, which is like a local major grocery store, and we had them match us on gift card purchases so we could get a bunch of gift cards to the grocery store in musicians' hands. And that, that's one thing we'll do. I do have this series happening. I'm hopeful that if we can gather enough money, everybody who's doing it volunteered. Everybody's volunteering their time. Nobody's getting paid. Some of them are throwing a tip jar out. Some of them are saying just give it to World Central Kitchen. That's what I'm doing. But that they're, maybe I can raise enough money to help, actually pay these musicians who played this gig. And then we can, and then we can, feel like we helped some working musicians work during this downtime. But yeah, it's really just, we have our own, network, our own reach, our own people. So we are open and available for donations. I don't know that anybody would necessarily want to donate stocks either. We have a brokerage account. We can, we are 501c3. We're a nonprofit. Donations are tax deductible. And at this point, we are simply in the gathering of funds phase. And in a few weeks, once we kind of see what landed, we will probably start making some plans to distribute it amongst our community.
Right on. Well, I appreciate you giving us that download as far as the Music Industry Relief Fund. And that seems like something that we can hammer on for several months.
Yeah.
But in that time, we'll definitely get the word out for this effort and put the QR code on our social channels. And of course, check the show notes. We're going to be talking about a number of relief efforts and funds on this pod, but I definitely wanted to, give primo slot to you and to iamAVL, and because I know the work you do and I know the reputation you have, and I know you just move through stuff with integrity, and I'm happy to throw whatever kind of network we have here on the podcast in your direction, because as we both have acknowledged, this is not going to be a quick turnaround, and I think it's important that we keep the plight of the greater Asheville community and people's, in front of them, in their hearts, in their minds, in their wallets, and,
Hey, and that being said, man, first of all, yes, thank you so much for the shout out that you're giving here to us and that. And another way that I just want to let people listening to this know, if you have any festival promoters or, artists who are looking to record, hire us like the Asheville musicians, sound people, production people. We are ready and need the work. I think that's one of the best ways that people can support. If you're throwing a festival, get a couple of our bands on it. If maybe you're doing a tour, maybe you give a look to some group here that you really have heard of or like and put them on your tour. Well, I just think that's one of the things that we're going to need, and especially through this winter. Yeah, I just wanted to add that. You can hire us. There's a wealth of talent here. Come make your record with me, please. The studio's been closed for almost a month now, and we're ready for work too. So there's a lot of resources here for musicians and people in the industry when they need it, and we are open for business. And Brand, thank you so much for giving a platform for this. It's really, really incredible, and we all really appreciate it, man. Thank you.
Amen. I would say it's my pleasure, but I don't think pleasure is the word. But it's my duty and privilege, really. So thank you for coming on and sharing what had to be some difficult recollections to revisit.
Of course, brother. Anytime.
I know there's another way to see to the eyes of the finding light. May you release me completely. I know there's another way.
Yes, indeedy. Big thanks and a deep bow to Josh Blake for that thoughtful, intense, emotional, harrowing, and ultimately heart-filling reflection. Next up, one of my best friends in the whole world. Somebody who I admire deeply, has taught me a whole lot about life, about sustainability, consumption, about my voice, my platform, and just somebody I'm grateful to have on my team, and that's Wren, formerly known as Jill Trashley, founder, owner-operator of the Nohm Collective and the Mertales. She's been based in Asheville for over a decade, and she was on episode 73 with Maria Stark, if you're curious about her kind of work and her journey and her consciousness. But this is specific to her experience during and really after Hurricane Helene, from her side of town and her side of the tracks. So let's hear from Wren of the Nohm Collective. Had to come with the random rap because that's our shit. For whatever reason, my recording didn't start till after Wren began to talk, after I asked her a question. So she kind of picks it up in the middle here, where I was asking her to kind of just describe her surroundings right in that moment as we began to talk, as she was down there in Asheville, and just wanted her to bring us to her moment. So that's where we start here.
At least it's not constant helicopters overhead, which is definitely became somewhat of a soundtrack the first several weeks after the hurricane. It's almost like the noises totally shifted, just like the landscape, I think, just with that much impact, animals and trees and traffic and helicopters. It was definitely a different soundscape that we entered into for some time. And it's starting to normalize. It feels like back to, I don't know, you could say the new normal.
Yeah, that's something that I think people might not realize right away, is the sort of tranquility and just the peaceful lack of sensory overload that made a mountain town like Asheville and its surrounding hollers such a sought after place for people to visit, and why so many creative and artistic and like-minded folks rooted down there. Sonic tranquility has been uprooted in a way that is probably hard for people to grasp unless they're living through it. So that's just like one of those little things that the average person might not think of, but is a big change for people who have made their lives there and are used to a certain just a peacefulness. So yeah, this isn't about like goriness or hearing the worst of the worst. Of course, we want to hear anything that you want to share or purge or make us aware of or enlighten us. But at the same time, the focal point for this pod, for this episode, is to continue to amplify the stories of people who are living this reality, boots on the ground, the creative community, and also, you know, not everybody is in the creative community, but they live in those communities. And I think that the other people, you know, blue collar workers, restaurateurs, business owners, people like yourself who kind of check 7 boxes, you know, you're a business owner, you're a creative, you're a community member, you're an activist. I want to just amplify those stories because the rest of the nation, you know, was very focused for a time. And then with politics and holidays and capitalism, you know, people's attentions can just move on. But this is going to be a lengthy process and journey of recovery. So my job here is to try to be a facilitator and amplify stories. And I've been following yours. Obviously, we're dear friends. I'm also a fan of your work and a consumer of your goods and somebody who just admires your path. You've taught me a lot about the environment, about permaculture, about consumption, about self-care. So I think it's important to hear from you, from your perspective, through your work, through the community you keep, through the way you tend to the land. Just take us to your new reality, wherever you want to start.
Well, I know that we had been watering the seeds for this conversation for several weeks, and I feel like this is definitely more of a prime time to be speaking just because I've gone through the initial weeks post-hurricane, dropped into mutual aid, dropped into myself, my home, my direct neighborhood, and then left for a few weeks to be of service in other places. There was a part of me that felt guilty leaving and a part of me that felt like it was in self-preservation to leave and get some space and then to come back recharged so that I could dive back in and assess the needs of my community after some time had passed. And so I'm coming back refreshed, definitely, from my West Coast trip and feeling like there is a new turning point at which me as a business owner and a community member can really serve. I think that, you know, there was many weeks of just being not able to access my emotions, not able to access grief. And I think one of the beautiful things that I witnessed and that I'm continuing to witness are certain archetypes really expressing themselves in our community. From, you know, the folks who can feel the grief immediately and like start moving that for us to the folks who jump into high gear, like activism mode, like working 14, 20-hour days, you know, with chainsaws and driving long hours to gather resources and everything in between. There's been many archetypes expressed that have been beautiful to witness. And I think everyone's heart is in the right place with this. So now that we're here at this juncture where we have water running again, it's still not potable. However, we do have running water restored, at least here in Asheville proper. I think that the question has been how, you know, how will we return? And I think that's a big question for a lot of business owners like myself. There's been a lot of businesses that haven't opened, businesses that will not reopen, and businesses that are open. And it's curious to see like where people are resourced. And I think that's one of the bigger questions is like, where are the resources going? How are we generating resources locally, as well as the network that many of us have created through just the reputation of Asheville as a whole, as well as the fact that many of us that live here are also travelers and transient. And so there is this like larger national or global network, if you will, of people that we've been leaning into. And I'm going to be jumping into more mutual aid as a support system to a grassroots organization that's based here in Asheville that typically moves along the East Coast to do disaster relief aid. And so these are friends of mine that I know are in a similar community with you, the foamy homies, you know, affiliated with Dr. Bronner's, backed by Organic Valley, and their organization is called Grassroots Aid Partnership. And so, you know, being here local where the headquarters is for them, you know, other than COVID, like they haven't really set up here in all the years that they've been an organization. And so there is something to be said about bringing the village mindset back to Asheville during this time where things can seem really destabilized, yet the level of resilience that I've witnessed and that many of us have witnessed, and that's been televised to a degree, has been a really beautiful thing. And it's really like questioned, I think, capacity for many of us. Like, what is our capacity to show up every day for community? What is our capacity to show up for ourselves? And at what point are we willing to give or to receive in a space like Asheville, where pre-hurricane, we were on a huge trajectory of gentrification. There was a lot of development happening that is now halted. You know, we've been known for our clean water and our breweries simultaneously. And we were starting to witness like a lot of larger entities infiltrating Asheville, even with the DOT finally moving forward with expanding highways and bringing in a lot more traffic into the area. And so there's been like this sacred pause, I feel, in development in Asheville and a return to the commons. And I think that's something worth highlighting, is this return to the commons that we see in the face of disaster when resources and certain things do become strained or do get cut off or forgotten. Like, who's still here and what are we really made of, and how can we really insource our health, and how can we insource community care and, you know, be in this pause before we see the economy bounce back.
Word. Thank you. Yeah, you really gave us a whole lot to chew on there. And working backwards, when you talk about a return to the commons and the gentrification trends and trajectory pre-storm, and I know there's always been the conversation about tourism and Airbnb and rents and commodification in downtown. I know that's been a dialogue that's been, you know, loud for some time. And then when you think of all these interested, moneyed capitalist parties, those entities are nowhere to be found in the aftermath of something like this. But the same common folks who are getting priced out of, you know, areas that they've lived generation after generation, they're still there if they survived. And they're the people that are banding together to be the community again. Not that they ever left, but it seems like some of that capitalism and gentrification and greed, if paused, has allowed for, you know, Ashevilleans to really, you know, check in with themselves, their neighbors, remind, you know, where they're from, who they are. And I think those are the stories that I want to hear and help tell. And I think that one of the remarkable things from everybody I've spoke to, which has been Josh Blake and Andy Fyfe and Leah Song and yourself, have been like the human stories of the day-to-day tasks and interactions and the humanity that's sort of risen above the divisions that have kind of defined this time in this country. And that shit just kind of doesn't matter. And there's just a reality in front of me. Can you talk about, like, what are you doing? You mentioned you were picking up 12 pounds of honey earlier. I know that you've been on, you know, you're feeding people. I know you've been making runs out to rural places. Can you just take us through a little bit of your daily experience with your neighbors, with your people, serving them, being served, being helped, just so people can get a greater understanding of that kind of community?
My day-to-day has been dynamic, just the way I like it. And I think what has been the root for me has been my morning practice. Because I think like it's been really easy to just wake up and think about the current affairs of the world and of our town, and to just go into like go mode. And even through all of this, all of the cycles that we've experienced so far, my morning practice has been like huge. And it's simple. It's like those things that help me feel normal and help me feel in my body. Things like stumbling out to my garden with a hot cup of tea, just like meeting the morning dew, and putting my garden to bed, like really lights me up. And blowing the leaves off my back deck. Yeah, there's that. And then there's waking up at 4 a.m., like bawling my eyes out, just being like, wow, this is my reality. Then moving into other parts of my day where I'm still a businesswoman and I'm invoicing and packing up orders and communicating with my wholesale accounts and industry partners. And then there's mutual aid work, bringing my medicine out to frontline workers, volunteers, local organizers, and filling their cups and ensuring that like the nervous system of our mutual aid is being regulated through hydration and minerals and just like the allyship of the plant kingdom that we have here in Appalachia that's so vibrant and so diverse. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of dynamicism to my day and it keeps me motivated. I found fun in some of these days, many of these days. And when I'm out and someone's asking me how I'm doing, or when I ask someone how they're doing, I've noticed a pause in the way that we're answering, which I actually really love. I love witnessing that in our community because people are really checking in with themselves to be like, where am I? How am I? And while many of us are taking this day by day, there's still like that check-in happening. And so when there's a good day, that's something to celebrate, And when there's a day that's not so good, that's also something to celebrate because maybe we're making a breakthrough and moving through something and this day is not great, but we still show up to the farmer's market and we're still willing to be seen through all of this, or we're showing up on the dance floor, or we're showing up to volunteer. It's a beautiful thing. And so it's just like those simple things of, cooking a meal to share, somebody cooking a meal and that being gifted to me, like a meal that I didn't have to cook and I didn't have to do dishes for. There's been like a lot of sweet exchanges just in like these basic things that like we as humans need at a baseline in order to regulate before we even start thinking about work, thinking about the election, thinking about traveling and the holidays and all of these things. Like you were saying, a lot of that just dissolved. And it's like, okay, how do we just get clean water? What does that even look like anymore? So I'm feeling like really grateful to come back to running water and to have a filtration system that's been upgraded due to my partnership with Greenfield Water Solutions, to be able to come back into production. Because for me, like if I'm not feeding people or making medicine for people, like I lose, like I kind of get knocked off my core a bit, knocked off my center. And it's hard to feel like a sense of purpose. And so I feel like for me, my day to day is being in that place of production, being in that place of creation. And we're also celebrating 6 years of collaboration with Asheville Dispensary. And so we're having a really big anniversary party this weekend at the Elixir Bar here in West Asheville. And also, like together grieving the loss of the new bar that we just opened in the River Arts District that was swept away with the flood. And that was a part of our expansion and a part of something that we were already in celebration of. And so to actually alchemize that into how we'll be gathering this weekend feels really strong and feels like a milestone. In light of all of this, there's definitely some sparkles of celebration that are happening.
Yeah, I think it's important to celebrate the victories. What do you want to get out to your peers, like-minded individuals, benevolent, philanthropic people that maybe I'm not asking or the news isn't covering?
I think that a couple things come up. We were talking about the return to the commons for a moment. And I think that one of my encouragements to people in light of this shift is how much do you know your neighbors? Like how much do you know or feel supported or stable within your direct surroundings? That's one of the silver linings of all of this, is just the total drop of ego and drop of labels and class and levels of income and all of those things. And it's more just like that raw, vulnerable humanity of who can you lean on, for a sandwich? Like, I mean, I had one of the most amazing things happen during the beginning of all of this, which was I found and was able to identify a few neighbors in my direct community who have been yearning to compost. Okay. Yearning to compost. And you know how much I love to compost. It's like one of my favorite ways to close the loop. So in short, I'll just say, like, we were able to resource a community need and then to actually act on it immediately in my front yard. And we now have a community compost system that 3 households are using. And I mean, that's the beauty of like really knowing your neighbors and being able to assess needs or desires that you're able to act on almost immediately, even in the face of, recalibration. And I feel really grateful for that because there's this level of just like, like my nervous system can take such deep breaths knowing that I am in this like direct network of people who are so kind. And even as different as we all are, we're all so similar in the same way. And we've all gone through something so similar that we can bond over. And I have to give you some geographical context of where I am right now. I am a stone's throw away from the French Broad River. It is directly behind my neighbor's house and it drops down. And our backyard is where the River Arts District is. And so there's definitely like an energy to being this close to one of the higher areas of impact within the Asheville, like downtown inner city limit, because the river is running right here through town, right behind us. And so there is something around our connection to water and just the elementality and seasonality of living here, where there's definitely more attention to place and to energy. And so, yeah, I feel very grateful for like that community block party mixer aspect that was sparked during all of this. And I really want that for people, not just through disaster. So I really want to encourage like curiosity in that, because there's a lot of privatization that happens and we get so within our own worlds. And I've been guilty of this too, to live in Asheville this long and not always know my neighbors. But I am like so grateful to know my neighbors on the level that I know my neighbors. And I think like the other thing that came through in order to collaborate with Grassroots Aid Partnership, to show up at these various events happening every weekend all over the region, where many of us business owners are coming together market style to really just create these temporary social spaces for people and to have our offerings available and to just dance in the merriment of community. It's creating somewhat of a structure to actually allow me to be within the unknown of, our near future. It really lends itself into these more holiday rich seasons that we're coming into and to the consumerism that like is going to continue happening. And so while there is this like call to action for folks to stay local, buy local, really support your local economy, especially for the holidays and for your day-to-day consumption, there is still like that aspect to Asheville that's been really rooted in like that artisanal, creative, mom and pop entrepreneurial spirit that I really feel like has impacted a lot of our country. I feel like a lot of people know of Asheville as being that way. And so to think that like that could dissolve because of a disaster, I mean, I refuse to think that that's what will happen. I trust and I know that we will support each other and we will, be able to make it through these times.
People like Wren here with the Mertels and the Nohm, like they still have businesses and products for your holiday, wants and needs. And if there was ever a time to support business owners in that region, it is now. So we'll definitely have some links in the show notes regarding, how we can support Asheville creatives as philanthropically and holidays wise. But I wanted to ask, just as a call to action to wrap up, if people are interested in getting behind the grassroots action with the Foamy Homies and your work, if you could just let people know where to find information on that, how to donate, how to stay abreast to what your needs are for, items or services to be donated. And also, individuals. I know that you've been a steward to your community with regards to raising awareness for individual GoFundMe's, individual efforts. So we'll put the links in the show notes, but verbally, can you just direct people where to stay abreast?
Yeah, certainly. I would say before I list off, my direct network of who I'm supporting and who I'm consuming and whatnot is to, ask anybody listening who's been to Asheville, like, where did you go when you were in Asheville? What did you love? What venues did you go to see live music? What restaurants did you go to get amazing meals at? Did you make it to the art district? And were there any artists that you fell in love with? And really checking in with that first, that's going to tell you exactly where to go because, everybody's at a state of rebuilding right now. And if they're still here in town, they're still active in creating ways to continue sharing their offerings. And so that's really a good place to start. My direct network that I'm, very grateful to be affiliated with is grassrootsaidpartnership.org. You can also find them on Instagram at Grassroots Aid Partnership. Also, my friends at Art Garden Asheville. It's a series of visionary artists who've been at several music festivals and transformational festivals around the country that I'm sure many of you have seen. We've got Jack and Dylan and Annie who've been at the helm of Art Garden. And unfortunately, their space flooded out and they're looking to relocate and get things back out onto the gallery walls and into the homes of people. And so Art Garden AVL, Art Garden Asheville is a great one. We've got the Nohm Collective and the Mertails, which are my projects. And there's many more I can share, but
well, we've gotten a couple from each guest.
Yeah.
And so we have a nice collection of places people can steer their efforts, their donations, etc. One thing that has been a common through line, whether it's somebody who's only been in Asheville since 2020, like Andy, or somebody like yourself who's been there a decade, or Josh Blake, who touched down in 97, is nobody's leaving. Nobody's giving up. Nobody's going anywhere. They're committed to the recovery and resurgence and rebirth because it's important to us to see y'all thrive back on your feet. So I want to say thank you and that I love you and we got you.
I love you, B. Thank you so much for creating space for all of us to share what's on our heart and just staying on the pulse of what's happening here in Asheville.
All right. I want to say thank you to Wren for another beautiful conversation. Give us a lot to chew on, and we are grateful. Deep bow, gratitude, and appreciation. Check out the Nohm Collective. Links are in the show notes. Of course, the Mertails, which is a great non-alcoholic mixer beverage, or you can use it for spirits too. She's got a lot going on down there. So definitely check out the Nohm Collective and the Mertails. And we're going to finish up over at Asheville Music Hall with Brian Good, who's the owner, operator, proprietor. He has a partner, but he's somebody I don't know personally in real life. We've never met, as far as I know, but we're connected through a gazillion people. He hosts a lot of my favorite bands in his room, and he's a very big supporter of the music and arts community in the region at large. And he's putting together a benefit show spearheaded by Joe Marcinek, who you're hearing in the background now. Joe's somebody who I also know, and him and I are trying to put our heads together to do some stuff to further raise funds. But in the meantime, he's playing a gig out there. Be a link in the show notes for anybody who's in the Asheville area who wants to go to that. As far as Joe and an all-star crew of local Asheville musicians who you're going to hear about. But I wanted to shout out that show specifically. Shout out Joe, because he donated items to our silent auction, and also is putting on this concert, and is also interested in doing stuff out here in the Bay. He lives in Santa Cruz, I believe, currently with his boo. So shout out Joe Marcinick. We see you, dog. And he apparently is very close with Brian Good. Brian Good spoke very highly of Joe in this interview. I know they've worked together for years and years and years. And so I had to play a Joe Marcinick song to bring in Brian Good. And Brian is a busy man, and he's got multiple businesses, plus the recovery, plus a Brady Bunch house of 5 boys. So it took us a minute to find the time, but I definitely wanted to get a proprietor of a venue, and also somebody that I didn't have such a close personal relationship with, like the previous conversations that we already heard. So without any further ado, this man spells his name Brian with an I, so do I and I, Rastafari. Let's go. B-Gets, Brian Good, coming up next. All right. Well, we got another cat from Asheville on the line, Brian Good, Asheville Music Hall. Somebody that I don't know personally, but I'm connected to professionally and through community. And he's been working really hard, like so many of the folks we are talking to. So please introduce yourself, Brian, and just let us know where you're at, where you're from, and what you're doing down there.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for inviting me on the podcast here. My name is Brian Good. I'm the owner of Asheville Music Hall, and been dealing with the hurricane here in Asheville and trying to get the music world back up and open.
Yeah, that's an important thing. I mean, it's such a huge arts community, and your room is a big part of the lifeblood of the whole scene down there. So what is the current status of your venue, and are you guys open and having concerts again?
So we are currently open 100%, which is great, at the Asheville Music Hall and the One Stop, which is in the same building. We're located in downtown Asheville, so we didn't get any major damage to the building or the venue. We were closed for a solid month, though, due to the lack of water and resources and the curfew that was in town. So we were shut down for a month. We did lose our outdoor venue in the hurricane, which is in Biltmore Village over at the French Broad River Brewery. We have a 1,250 cap venue there that we just built, and unfortunately, the hurricane took that down the river.
I'm saddened to hear that, and also stoked that you were able to persevere with the One Stop in Asheville Music Hall. So just to give some folks just a frame of reference, a better understanding of how it went down. Like, why was it that your downtown venue was relatively, unaffected aside from the water situation, but then your other venue was completely wiped out? Is that a geographical thing? Storm was worse in one area than the other?
I would say both. There's different sides of town that took a harder hit than others. That's for sure. Like the east side of town, over Black Mountain, Swannanoa, Montreat, heading up towards the Highlands there, and then even heading south towards Fairview and Lake Lure got a majority of the brunt. The west side of town, which is where I live on, we were lucky that we didn't get as much damage. Still a lot of trees down and trees and roofs and cars, but not to the extent that the east side of town. The downtown area sits on a hillside, so we weren't at the lowest point when the water flooded up, which was a blessing for the downtown Asheville area. And of course, we don't have a lot of huge trees in that area. We have more buildings, so we didn't get as much tree damage downtown. Where my outdoor venue was in Biltmore Village area, that's what you're seeing on TV, where the water came rushing through. We had 21 foot of water come through the Biltmore Village area. The building that we own had 12 feet of water come through it, and we basically had to get rid of everything inside of it. 20,000 square foot building and sitting on a couple acres right outside of the Biltmore estate. So unfortunately for us there, we lost our pizza restaurant, our outdoor venue, and then my partner has the French Broad River Brewery there, and but we're rebuilding. So we're not going to give up. We're going to keep fighting, and hopefully be up in a couple months again.
Yeah, that's a arduous task, I'm sure, especially with all the other businesses suffering similar fates. And as you noted, you're lucky that you have the other building and or the other establishment downtown to stay open. And what was the size of your staff at the venue that you lost? Like, how many people are out of work due to that?
So I would say on the entire property, there's about 25 people out of work. You know, we would pull a lot of our staff from the Asheville Music Hall when we did shows there. So we didn't have a huge full-time staff there, but we did have, you know, with the brewery and the restaurant, we did have about 25 people out of work. We've been lucky enough to get most of them back working again, you know, especially the ones that want to work. Some people aren't comfortable, you know, doing cleaning up and things like that, just due to the toxicity of the mud, the stress of it, you know, being in a disaster zone has a lot of mental impact on you. So there are a few people that, you know, are just requesting to stay at home until we get to a point where it's not as devastating. Most of the people we were able to roll into the music hall and kind of absorb staff there and to keep the wheels turning. So that was great. It's good to kind of get people back after, you know, people back working after a disaster like that. A lot of folks are just happy to get their mind off of things and, you know, start sorting widgets again, if you will.
Totally. Yeah, I get both sides of that coin because, of course, you know, an idle mind is when, you know, you can really get down or really get, you know, depressed and such. And at the same time, like if you don't have clean water to bathe and you don't have the ability to, you know, keep fresh food in the house or to navigate around, like the concept of making it to and from work and bringing your best self to work sometimes is just not possible for some of these folks. So I really appreciate you kind of painting both sides of that so people can understand that, like, I am sure you realize the rest of the country, whether it was the election or the holiday season, it's like life goes on, but that's not the case for you guys down there. The rebuild is going to be long and difficult and expensive and taxing. I wanted to just ask you to unpack a couple of things you just mentioned there. One is the toxicity. So like, what are you up against in that regard? Because yeah, I mean, you hear the calls for, like, you know, the hazmat kind of suits and the high boots, and you hear about, you know, there's toxic stuff in anything that was in people's homes and their furniture and their clothes. What are you like navigating with that with regards to like the mud and the toxicity and then, you know, what are people fearing in that regard that is going to keep them home?
Sure. So we had about 3 feet of mud throughout the property, inside and outside, when we arrived after the storm. And, you know, we found just in our parking lot alone, you know, massive gas tanks, propane, you know, I think they're like 1,000-pound propane tanks that floated down the river. You know, the amount of trash and plastic. There was a PVC piping factory that was located along the river. And, you know, all the little molecules that are, you know, melted down to make PVC plastic, you know, went into the water. You know, just, you know, we don't really know what's in the mud. And then, of course, as that mud dries, it turns into dust, and then dust is in the air, and cars are driving down the roads, and there's clouds of dust everywhere. You know, as we're trying to, you know, clean up the area. I mean, this is even in downtown Asheville. There's dust everywhere just because cars driving around. It's, you know, everybody's car is dirty right now, so we don't have water to wash cars. So it's you know, it kind of gets airborne, and then you worry about it getting into your lungs. You know, what's the chemical effect on your skin from the mud? It's just, you know, it's a big unknown for us, and you know, it's I think that's the biggest challenge, is that there's, you know, not a lot of information out there on that particular, you know, toxicity level. And then, of course, you know, all the buildings that got flooded are now molding, unless you ripped out the walls and the insulation inside of everything. So then you got black mold issues as well in people's houses, and cars that got water damage, and furniture, and, you know, just everything.
Oh man, it sounds like such a nightmare. And just the fact that the resilience and the sort of positive mindset that has, you know, that's permeating from where y'all are out to us is remarkable. Now that you kind of give us some details of just the toxicity, the murky nature, the uncertainty, and yeah, when you talk about stuff like mold, that can really come and bite you in the ass down the road after you've made repairs, after you've rebuilt. So yeah, I don't envy the situation, but at the same time, I'm really inspired by the way the community is rallying. And I was wondering if you could just kind of give me, from your perspective, some of the, first person narratives, boots on the ground of the way your particular community, the music community, your staff, the neighborhood you live in, how are they responding? However you want to, express that.
Sure. Well, I've never been more proud of my community in my life. The way that the people here in Asheville rose up and supported their neighbors, did anything and everything they could. People that were musicians started bucket brigades for flushing toilets in senior homes. At the music hall, we were, trying to feed as many people as possible because everything was shut down. So, we were one of the few places that had power right after the storm, and we were feeding all the tourists and anybody and everybody that needed food. It was just amazing how, just our community came together. People were grabbing guitars and setting up in front of just random spaces to get music out there. There was a lot of love going on, and like I said, I couldn't be happier for our community and proud of them.
Yeah, I mean, just paying attention online, seeing average citizens springing into action. Friends of mine, whether Katie who lives there or Lydia who lives here, just like making it their business, or Paula, to get out there and get a car and just get out to people.
Yeah, the outpouring of support from the community outside of us. I mean, a bunch of, musicians want to come into town and throw benefit concerts. People, I had one guy just, show up at my door one day and said, "Hey, I brought 1,000 hot dogs. Is there any way I can fire up a grill and serve food to people?" I mean, it was amazing.
You love to hear that, man. And I want to kind of just unpack that a little bit more. We talk about benefits concerts. We've been talking out here about trying to do something just to raise some money to send to y'all. But I understand you got something underway with Joe Marcinek, who I don't even know he lives out here now, but he's really from the East Coast and Florida, and he's kind of like beloved everywhere. And what a great human, amazing player. And I know he's working with you to plan something with a bunch of local cats. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, I used to have a hashtag whenever I followed him on Facebook for the longest time. Where's Joe Marcinek today? He is one of the kindest humans ever, and a dear friend of mine. And he reached out to put together a benefit here in Asheville. It's going to be on December 6th at the Asheville Music Hall, and it's going to help support my venue as well as iamAVL. And iamAVL is, Josh Blake's nonprofit organization that does a lot for the music community as far as streaming music. And he's also putting together money for musicians, which is amazing. But that's going to be on December 6th. We got Rebecca Todd, Marcus White, Jeff Sipe, Isaac Haddon, Josh Blake, just a treasure trove of local musicians coming in to, help with this benefit.
Yeah, we love Joe. We love Josh. iamAVL has been a sponsor of this pod for numerous episodes, and Josh has been on the show. And so I wanted to ask, because you mentioned that you reeled off a number of renowned local cats that are on this gig. What's the reality for Asheville musicians now? You guys are down a bunch of rooms and a bunch of opportunities, and I'm sure it's even harder for people to travel if their homes are in disarray. So what is take the temperature of the music community there, and what are these people, up against post storm?
Well, I mean, I think you hit a lot of the nails right there. I think that it's going to be hard for a little while. I mean, it was already hard enough for a musician in Asheville before this, just because of the cost of living in Asheville and wanting to be here. So I think it's going to be really hard for musicians to get through this without help. But once again, they're a resilient group. The Asheville Music Hall and the One Stop have always been the cornerstone of the music community here. Because we're open 6 nights a week, and 80% of the music we have is local. So we're going to continue to support, and that's the reason why I opened up as fast as I did. Was people need to heal through music, and musicians need to get paid, and my staff needs to get paid, and people want to hear music. So, might have not been the best time, and it's been really hard because we don't have any tourists to come and help support us because our tourism industry's down. But, as far as getting open, that was a goal for me to help support these musicians and get money in their pocket.
Well, you're doing a great job of that, and we're able to see that all the way out here in the Bay Area. Everybody's really grateful for y'all getting open, whether it was serving food, starting to throw the shows, getting musicians back to work. And yeah, that's really my goal here, having you on the show, having this pod, is just to raise awareness for what that community, that area is up against, arts community, and just the good people of Appalachia. And, it occupies a special place in my heart when I look at the metrics from this podcast, like who listens. You got New Orleans, Denver, Bay Area, Philly, New York, and Asheville.
Mm-hmm.
Like all these major metropolitan markets, and this tiny little mountain town right there with them. So I'm grateful that people care about what I'm doing over there, and I have a lot of great friends there. I've had some good times there, and I really wanted to just kind of do my part. Obviously, we did the fundraiser a few weeks back, the silent auction, which was great.
Thank you so much for that. That was amazing.
Hey, I jumped on board to a moving train. I mean, those girls had that thing going, and I knew that I could bring a lot of good options, and it went great. So, and then when that was over, it's like, what's next? Okay, we'll do a pod. Maybe we'll try to do a show or two out here to raise some money. So I wanted to just finish with kind of a personal question, if you're down to answer it, because in our text messages, you mentioned you have 5 sons, and they keep you busy. So if it's okay, how are they dealing with this? Like, how are you shepherding them through this sort of catastrophic, unforeseen experience, and how are they responding, or just children in general, their peers, young people in the area? I'm just curious. I can't imagine living through this as an elementary school age kid,
Sure. So I've got a blended family, Brady Bunch family, if you will. Jen and I have 5 boys. She has 2 and I have 3. We have 2 18-year-olds, 2 15-year-olds, and a 9-year-old. I think, the older boys, the 4 older boys, they were with me downtown when all this was happening. I mean, they wanted to come help and feed and support. They were ready to roll up their sleeves and dive into it. The 9-year-old is, struggling a little bit, especially being out of school for a month, with social and friends and things like that. But they're resilient. I mean, these kids have, been through COVID now, and then this, our second apocalypse here in Asheville. I mean, I think they're going to be fine and running through it, but it's definitely a mental, challenge to stay positive. Continue to think things are going to be well. We do a lot in our household, with getting together as a family every day and talking about these things to make sure that no one's going down any rabbit holes.
Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I have a friend, Steffi, who we just spent Halloween with at Swanee, and she has kids I think a 9-year-old and a little younger. And yeah, I was just checking in with her similarly because, my heart aches for these kids between the COVID experience and then now living through this. So, thank you for leading by example and for sharing, your story, the story of your community. Thank you for working so hard to get the music playing again. One last thing I'll ask is, how can people stay abreast to what's going on with, Asheville Music Hall, One Stop? Like, you want to direct people to a website or a donation spot?
The great folks up at Nectar's put together a GoFundMe for the French Broad River Brewery outdoor stage in Asheville Music Hall, which has been successful, and I appreciated it. But, for right now, just everyone can stay up to date with our social media, Facebook, Instagram. Our website's ashevillemusichall.com. And we post everything we're doing and all the different ways to help support us there. I was going to say, I tell people, if you can't go out and see music and you still want to support it, buy a ticket anyways, buy a T-shirt, donate money to a band, share the link. Get the word out. Even if you can't show up to the event, do what you can to help support live music, or we're not going to have it.
Yeah, that's important. And that's something we learned during COVID, was you could still support without going to the show. And we're going to continue to do that. And thank you for pointing that out. I was going to say all those links will be in the show notes for this episode, along with the donation link for iamAVL Musician Relief Fund. I want to thank you, Brian, for making the time. I know, you got a lot of irons in the fire, so I'm grateful for this time and energy and your message.
Appreciate it. Thanks again.
1, 2, 3. It's a wild ride you and I've been on. Let's keep it going, coyote. Yeah, it's a wild ride. I try to be strong. Let's keep it going, coyote. Here come that silly sobbing. Come on, let's see the show.
Yes, indeedy. I want to say thank you and a deep bow to everybody you just heard from on the whole episode. Leah Song, Andy Fyfe, Josh Blake, Wren from the Nohm Collective, and Brian Good of Asheville Music Hall. All the organizations and efforts and fundraisers that we discussed, you can find links in the show notes. I want to shout out, of course, iamAVL and Grassroots Mutual Aid Partnership. And of course, if you have any questions or you want to be connected, feel free to email the show, b.getz@upfullife.com. It was an honor and a privilege and a love letter to Appalachia to produce this episode. If you made it this long, longest episode in Upful Life history, give thanks. I needed to let the folks tell their stories and illustrate them to the best of my abilities, but really just let the people of who lived through that tell their tales. So give thanks for everybody who tuned in. And like we always do about this time, the Vibe Junkie JAMZ. Initially, it was going to be this song, Coyote, the new Gone Gone Beyond tune with Trevor Hall. But then I got hip to the Cactus, who you heard on this podcast back on episode 76, Granola Funk Express, otherwise known as Secret Agent 23 Skidoo. And he put together like this all-star collaborative song called Tomorrow's Cost. And it's all about the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. So, of course, I want to play that. And then I'm going to finish up with this song. I jumped in the car with my wife a couple nights ago and turned on the terrestrial local radio station and got leveled by this Al Green version of REM's Everybody Hurts. And I was reading the lyrics. I knew them, but I was reading them, and they're just so appropriate for closing this episode and for the people of Appalachia and everything that's been lost and the hope that you have to have. So with that, say goodbye, God bless, and we'll see you next time. Yes, indeedy.
Here we are, moving on. Every moment's new. When the whole world's washed away, we're left with me and you.
Yeah, they say Lord willing and the creek don't rise. Man, it rose so high, you could hardly see both sides. Ocean size, swallowing neighborhoods whole. Got my city yelling, save our soul. We knocked on wood, but the hurricane knocked our woods down. It's hard to think about feeling good now. Either your home needs to be rebuilt, or you're chilling with the pipes full of silt and surviving skill. Running full tilt, trying to find a solution, but despair creep in like groundwater pollution. That confusion of not seeking the path to take you back to where you can laugh. Living a half-life, working twice as hard. We act like we're finally in charge. The truth is our minds are scarred. Some days I'm just sad, and I miss the rad. This track was supposed to be uplifting though, my bad.
Here we are, moving on. Every moment's new. When the whole world's washed away, we're left with
behind me in line. Asked me how I'm doing and I lied that I'm fine. She asked if I was leaving, she was lost in thought. She said she heard that Austin was an awesome spot. I think, nah, yo, it didn't make sense. That's a different wavelength. I'ma stick with my town, even if it takes strength. Yo, I get it though. How the hell you gonna make rent? We used to laugh at tourists, now we wonder about where they went. A lot of people leave it. I guess we ain't as attractive with this community and the way it reacted. When it was just you and me, the way that we acted. The tragic brought out some magic. Yo, I'm screaming love is the way. I'm feeling lucky to stay. Not every town got 1,000-person flush brigade. It's kinda wild to see the downtown streets chill. And I don't know how we gonna rebuild, but we will.
Yesterday is gone. Can't go back to what we've lost. It's so hard to see beyond. But yesterday is what tomorrow calls. Here we are, moving on. Every moment's new. When the whole world's washed away, we're left with me and you. When the whole world's washed away, we're left with me and you.
When your day is long and your nights, the nights are yours alone. When you're sure you've had enough of this life, but hold on. Hey, don't let yourself go. Don't know. 'Cause everybody cries. Hey. And everybody hurts. Oh, sometimes everything seems wrong. Oh, yeah. Now it's time to sing along. Oh, my. When your days and nights are long, if you feel like letting go, hold on. Think you've had too much of this life, won't you hold on? Yeah. Well, hold on. Everybody hurts. Ooh, my. Take comfort in your friends. 'Cause everybody hurts. Yeah. Don't throw your hands up. No.
when you're on your own in this life, and your days and nights are long. Oh yeah. When you think you've had too much of this life, just hold on. Hold on. And everybody hurts, and everybody cries. Oh yeah. And everybody hurts.